What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was the secret desire of Fire Daimyo wife? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Minato, I wish you would reconsider. I don't understand why you are doing this. Hiyashi pleaded to his dearest and closest friend, whom he often thought of as a brother. The blonde man continued on his task, painting seals on the belly of his sleeping newborn son. It's for the best, Hiyashi. His deep voice was dulled out, a far cry to his usually cheerful though sometimes annoying voice. Hiyashi glared at the room around them, a secured ceiling area in a cave near the attacking demon that was dark and surrounded in candles in specific positions, seals on the floor that Hiyashi had helped put there. The Hyuga head answered viciously, I don't want to hear that. He doesn't deserve what you ask of us. Normally, Hyuga decorum forbids such outbursts. Though Hiyashi had long since broke away from the Hyuga train of thought, he still prided himself in holding his more negative emotions in check. But this was breaking him. Then a pair of blue eyes looked up from his work, dead compared to its always bright blue. The look held all that Minato was feeling at that moment: loss, anguish, pain. Hiyashi had asked him when he came back with the babe what was wrong, as Minato rarely cried. And when he learned why, it was driving Hiyashi even further to curse Kami-sama and all his ancestors for the fate he had placed on his two best friends. It was horrible enough that Minato was to leave this world to defend the village he swore to protect, but Kushina was passing on with him, leaving their son without parents. And now Minato asking him and the others to leave his son to the clutches of Konoha for a set time period? This infuriated the Hyuga. The two love birds weren't the only ones awaiting the birth of the two's child. All of their friends had also waited for the beloved child, even to the point of planning all the things they would help teach the child along with their own. And all the embarrassing stories they would tell the child. Only to have this ripped from them, because Minato wanted to protect the child from his father's enemies. Those blue eyes were still staring at Hiyashi, who only glared back, wishing against all hope that his friend's stubbornness wouldn't make this more difficult. But instead of the stubbornness, Minato was begging with his eyes. Hiyashi, even you know that it would be suspicious if the ninja clans of Konoha randomly chose a orphan to protect and train. How would you get away with explaining that? For my son's protection, I can't be associated with him publicly until he can protect himself or the Namikaze clan returns to Konoha. Please Hiyashi, I'm not ordering you as a Hokage, but I am asking you as my best friend, please do this for me. Hiyashi was torn between doing as Minato asked, tears brimming those dying eyes, and the fact that he was leaving his godson to be a target of this village. The guilt was rising in him, knowing that Minato's reasoning was right, no matter how much the Hyuga wanted to protest. But the thought of leaving the blonde infant to this cruel world sent him to unashamed tears that fell from his normally impassive pale lavender eyes. His voice was harsher, constricting as his throat was closing on itself. I will do as you ask, Hokage Minato-sama. For a brief moment, the Namikaze's blue eyes lightened up, with a range of emotions that Hiyashi could not begin to describe. Putting his son down in the cushioned cradle, he kissed the sleeping babe on the forehead. I'm sorry, Naruto, but there is no other way. I hope you can forgive me one day. I love you, and I am proud of you, my Senpuu Oji. Hiyashi still had tears running down his cheeks when Minato turned to face his best friend a last time. Hiyashi wanted to throttle him, seeing that foxy grin that had always been Minato's trademark, even though this situation was so serious. Nay, Hiyashi, I'll see you in 50 years or so, you old stickler. Be good, and don't forget to live. And with that, the fourth Hokage left the cave, without looking back at the son and godfather. When Hiyashi knew he was gone, riding away at the top of Gamabunta's head, he stood by to watch the child, letting his tears flow at the knowledge of the inevitable death of the greatest Kage to date. The passing of an incredible fiery woman he had come to think of as a very dear sister, and the idea of banishing the Prince of Konoha for the first few years of his life from his presence. It wasn't long for Hiyashi to see the seals being put to work, glowing brightly in blue and white. Then a surge of red that centered towards the babe, who now awakened, crying at the pain that he was receiving, wishing for the comforting presence of someone. Hiyashi had to remind himself not to run to the child, and waited for the process to complete. When the seals died down, and the surge of Kyuubi's spirit and chakra entering his prison inside the boy, Hiyashi ran forward, tenderly picking up the fearful infant, and quickly began to soothe him. The crying subsided within a minute, and Hiyashi looked down to closely inspect his godson. The seals were still showing on his bloated belly, and the Hyuga noticed that 3 small black whiskers that adorned each of the boy's cheeks, and would forever mark him as the container of Kyubi. He then noticed the blue eyes that his best friend had, a blue that made the sky envious. Naruto was looking up at this strange man, with no knowledge of what is about to him. Yawning, the barely 4 hours old babe returned to his much-needed sleep, and Hiyashi sighed, holding the child close to him for one last time before being torn from him for quite some time. Placing the babe back on the cushion, Hiyashi looked back at him, a sad smile on his face. Sleep well, Senpuu Oji. He then walked out the cave entrance, ready to report of finding a suspicious scene in a cave near the dead Hokage and the once rampaging Kyubi. 2 days since the attack. 2 long days of disorder and mayhem, in which he was forced to take office again at the untimely death of his predecessor. 2 very long days of the most grueling and ancient tortures known to man were inflicted upon the old man, and he cursed Minato for making him take back this position he gladly gave up. What were these tortures forced upon the old Hokage, you ask? Of course it is the murderous meetings with the vicious bloodthirsty village council. Well, it was the civilians trying to get the power. The shinobi were still trying to see who was left in the ranks, seeking to grab power with the loss of their 4th Hokage, and the Sandaime had to rein in these fire-breathing demons to make sure they got nothing, searching the law books and history of Konoha he knew so well to make it impossible for them to get anything. And then there was the most heinous of terrors that sent a shiver down any cage's back. It came straight from the 9th circle of hell, and it stayed with them until death or relinquish of office. Yes, it is none other than the dooming paperwork. He sighed, facing away from the mountains of paper that littered the office, his office once again, as he gazed out the window to see his destroyed but recuperating village. Despite what many would think, he had not been glad to don the robes and hat of office again, but he knew that Minato had been right. There was no other way. The sky was the blue shade closest to the now past Namikaze's eyes, and now it was made jealous by his son's eyes. Speaking of the boy, he wished so badly that he could hide him away from the world, protecting the heir of Namikaze Uzumaki from the cruel world, but he couldn't. If he was anything like his parents, he would always be the center of attention, and of course demand much socializing with others. But he couldn't very well put him into an orphanage when he had those markings on him. At least not yet, and he knew that the council would absolutely try to make sure he had as little contact with the child as possible, that much he was certain of. He needed to stay on the council's good side for now, even if they held no official authority, not only to protect his unsteady position, but to be able to protect the sun-kissed child as he grew up. He did not know what to do with the child. The Anbu watching the boy were on full alert, fully informed of who the child was, from pedigree to the 5-story chakra powerhouse demon inside his stomach. And he trusted them to care for the boy with every ounce in his body. The heir of the 4th Hokage and his stunning and breathtakingly deadly wife was a child bred for greatness, and they had their loyalties to both their Yondaime, and to Kushina, their comrade. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, he collected himself before going to yet another meeting, this time bringing news of the child to them. He had every viable speech ready, every loophole checked, and ready to answer any question they had. It would be the most prepared battle in his life. The walk to the council room was long and dark in his mind, but as he came close to the door, he saw that 4 Anbu were standing nearby, one of the men, Panda, holding the sleeping babe gently while rocking him silently, the blonde slowly falling asleep, his lungs gasping for a little air when he shifted, before it continued in a smooth pattern. The Hokage smiled gently, running a hand through the already formed small blonde spikes, and they were soft and silky despite their appearance. With a nod to the 4 Anbu, he headed into the room first, knowing other Anbu were well hidden for means of protection. The round table had already been filled with the shinobi clan heads, except the chairs of the Namikaze, Mitarashi, and Hitaki, and prominent civilians that made up the village council, and Danzo the ex-Anbu commander, and they all turned to him, nodding their heads to show at least some form of respect. He made his way to his chair, and sat without any prompt with the 4 Anbu behind him, though the one with Naruto in his arms was more hidden than the other 3. Sarutobi spoke gravely. Not many of you know what really happened the night Kyubi attacked. so I will give you the bare details. Minato-kun had no other choice than to seal the Kyuubi into a human child, making the boy a Jinchuriki. As his dying request, Yondaime asks that everyone of Konoha sees the child as a hero, because he was sacrificed to be the bearer and prison of the Kyuubi, protecting us with his very life. With that, the panda-masked Anbu stepped forward, showing the room the blonde whiskered marked child. Gasps were heard around the room, and then mutters. And then the oppositions came. It came first, naturally, from one of the civilians. Kill it now, before the demon gets out. Many of the other villagers agreed to this point, though several stayed silent, looking at the child with scrutinizing eyes, not so easily swayed by emotions unlike counterparts. The ninja in the room, however, stayed quiet. Many already knew who the child was. The looks were a dead giveaway. And the fact that all of them, minus the Uchiha and the missing clan heads, got a scroll the day after the attack with a "Read now or suffer the wrath" on the faces of Haruno Miyako and Inuzuka Sume, was a big clue. Though they weren't telling anyone about it. One of the villagers, a haggard elderly woman, turned to the silent ninja, and asked in a voice that oddly quieted and gained everyone's attention. "What do you think? You are after all the experts on these things. We know nothing of these skills, or what it takes to keep the demon secure in the boy's body." This actually shocked the shinobi that a civilian would come to them for an opinion in something they knew more about, instead of making their rash judgments again. But what was even more surprising was when Hyuga Hiyashi answered first, in a tone that was not condescending, but matter-of-fact. "The boy is human, not a demon, and the seal will hold." The Yondaime would never have placed a faulty seal on a child. And as a shinobi, and a longtime friend and teammate to Minato, I know that his seal mastery was the best. It rivaled if not surpassed our sensei, Jiraiya the Toad Sannin. This boy is the only reason we live at this very moment, and we should honor the Yondaime's last wish, and celebrate the rising of our hero. Soon's eye ticked, knowing full well that he almost let it out that Naruto was Minato's son, despite that Minato swore them all to silence for now. The Hyuga saw this action, and from his slight body language, she knew he was squirming on the inside at nearly ruining all the plans laid out by the clans of shinobi close to the boy's parents. No one but they could know of the boy's royal and powerful heritage and dormant bloodlines for now. If the villagers found out, they would gossip, and it would reach the wrong ears, and there was a high risk of the boy being hunted down, and the start of the Fourth Great Shinobi War. They weren't prepared as of yet, especially with the visit from the damned demon fox, but when the time came, they would inform the world of the boy's existence, and they would be ready to protect him and Konoha. They just needed time, and to keep this away from Sandim for a little before everything was planned out, so the professor had no chance to pull apart their strategies. After many more discussions, it was decided that the village was to be informed of the boy's burden and the Yondaime's last wish. Oh, how this would later come to infuriate the shinobi, as they learned almost too late that this village was filled with idiot civilians. The funeral for the Yondaime and all shinobi who died that night was a week after the attack. There was no sight of Tsunade, as expected, but no one was able to find Jiraiya either. Obviously, to mourn the loss of a great man, the Daimyo Daiki came with his entire family, and grieved with the people of Konoha. Very few knew the reason why they were weeping with them, but those who did could only stand beside them, unable to speak a word of whom they were all really spreading tears for. The daimyo had lost a son-in-law and a daughter, and there was no word on his grandchild, and by the looks of it, he had already lost hope. And they couldn't tell him the truth to his face, in front of the crowd. Sume wanted so badly to go up to her friend's family and tell them, point them in the direction in which the child was, so she couldn't be tormented anymore. She had lost her husband in the fight, but she at least had her daughter, her baby son, and her clan. Naruto was going to be raised with no one who loved him. His Anbu guardians didn't count because they weren't permanent, and they themselves couldn't be revealed until he was old enough to start training, but that would be 6 long years that the boy would grow up alone. No Minato to coddle and prank with his son. No Kushina to whip the boy into shape while also feeding him those amazing treats she made for only her friends. Miyako and Keiko were beside her, the pink-haired Anbu holding her child in her arms like Sume was, and Kiko's belly full from her pregnancy. She wasn't supposed to be out of bed rest, but the normally shy woman even scared Hiyashi when she told him she was saying goodbye to her 2 dear friends. Both of her fellow kunoichi and longtime friends had tears in their eyes as well, and all three yearned to save Naruto from the horrible years ahead of him before they could act. They only hoped the boy did not hate all of them. A hand squeezed Tsune's shoulder, and she saw Akamichi Shuza with his own wavering smile, along with all their friends and fellow councilmen, minus an Uchiha who stood beside her clan. The men all had somber faces, all with the same thoughts the three women had in mind. But Shuza, with a look that wasn't really determined, just absolutely sure of what he said. Naruto will forgive us. He'll understand why we are doing this. But for now, our prince is to remain unknown. Tsume sobbed out a laugh, letting 2 tears slip past her normally well-kept mask. Their prince, the clans called him. They were banishing their prince for 6 years, even if it was for the best. And it hurt. It felt like she was betraying her best friend by doing this to her blonde son. She looked to her daughter beside her, only 4 years old, and so much hassle. But Tsume loved it, it made her feel needed, and she had 2 beautiful children that made her days trouble and tiresome, but so worth it to see their smiles and laughs. Kushina would never get to feel this way, nor will Minato. And that was what made it hurt the most. Her sobs racked her body, as she held her son closely to her chest, and after barely a second, strong arms wrapped around her, and she cried into Chao's chest. Despite his wife beside him holding their son. While her friends watched her, knowing this hurt, as it hurt them just as much. The normally wild Inuzuka woman wept, and whispered for only them to hear what brought about her outburst. They'll never get to hug him, or scold him. They won't be here to see his first step, or his first word. They won't hear his laugh, or see his smile. They deserved him, and they can't even have him. The others' heads hung low, knowing she was right. The 2 had been so happy about the coming baby, beaming and making a ruckus as they situated a room in the empty Namikaze compound for the baby, and several of them had helped. Kushina's smile as she looked at her stomach was so beautiful, that they knew her child was loved from the beginning. Shibi spoke softly, gentle to their ears as always was. For them, we will remember everything about him, so that when it is our turn to join them, we can tell them the story of their son. That is the best we can do for now. At that moment, Hana tugged her mother's black kimono, innocent of what was going on, but seeing that her mama was crying, and she didn't like her mama crying. Okawa-san, when is Otou-san coming home? He can make us your favorite cake. Tsume was about to tell her a story, but Hiyashi beat her to it, grabbing the girl by the waist and placing her on his hip, as he had many times before. He joked, despite the situation. How about we make you the cake, Hana-chan? The girl's eyes shot open, gasped at the idea that Hiyashi-ji would do such a thing. Then she saw his slight smile and she pouted. This made all of the adults chuckle, as little Hana started quietly ranting about Hiyashi-ji being very mean, and a flour cake sounded very bad. The sky was bright, on this day of mourning, and very different from all the other days he mourned. He had become accustomed to the skies crying for him, and it was irksome that on this day, when he had lost his sensei and father figure, sensei's wife who was a mother to him, and the little babe he was to be a big brother to, there was not a drop. How could the skies not cry for them? Minato sensei and Kushinaheim were the greatest impacts on his life, and he often thought of them as parents, and they accepted the roles they played in his harsh and drawling life. And yet not a drop was spared for them, and the sky was the shade of blue closest to Minato sensei. Kakashi-kun, all life ends, but it is up to us to protect the youth of this village, because they are the next step, they are the future. Minato had told him that, when Kakashi asked why his sensei wanted to be Hokage. But it was taking Kakashi down a path of thoughts the young Hitaki did not want to take. He had lost everything he ever held dear, and now Sandaime seemed to be hiding something from him. A cry behind him woke him from his thoughts, and it took him a second to remember where he was. The room around him was light blue, decorated with baby animals on the walls, and toys surrounded the room. A crib was on the far wall from the window, and inside was a baby boy. Quickly, Kakashi rose from the rocking chair he had been sitting in, and went over to the crib, gently picking up the infant with whiskered cheeks, and after checking for any smell, took him over to the mini fridge, and grabbed a warm bottle he had just made a minute ago. Settling into the rocking chair, the boy, Naruto, quieted down with the warmth of someone holding him, and the food given to him. Kakashi gazed down at the unfortunate orphan. He wasn't so stupid as to believe that this child was Kyuubi, and he trusted his sensei in this. Some of the other shinobi had fallen into the spell of their pain, but a vast majority still kept their wits about them. And yet it was too dangerous to put the babe in the orphanage until he was 2 or 3. Because of the Kyuubi, forces were stretched very thin, and had to take even more missions to build its foundations again. But Sarutobi had made sure to place a guard and babysitters on the little tyke. And most of the older Anbu were extremely protective of the child, Kakashi noticed. The light shining through the window was warming to the Hitaki and orphan, casting them in a halo of light. After a while, Naruto finished the large bottle, and Kakashi put him over his shoulder to burp him, which didn't take long. When he was satisfied, he put the babe back in his lap, deciding to play with him for a bit, if only to occupy the both of them. And then he saw them. Those blue eyes that made the heavens jealous. His sensei's eyes. And they were this child's eyes. But that would mean. The infant gurgled a toothless laugh, and Kakashi's mismatched eyes lit up for the first time in a week. So this was what Sandame had been hiding from him. Well, he could pretend too, if to keep the old man under watch. He leaned forward, and Naruto grabbed his mask, and with a rather strong grip, pulled it down from the Hitaki's face. Kakashi smiled at the toothless smile of his sensei's son, and with certain pokes, the baby started shrilling in laughter again. Gray and obsidian eyes stared into those endless blues. I guess we have a lot of talking to do when you're older, nay, Naruto Oji. The Hitaki rearranged his earlier thoughts of how the day should be raining. Maybe it was best if the sky was trying to match the fathomless blues of his sensei and the infant. Because he at least had one left. After the long ceremony, Sume gave Kiba to Keiko to hold as she completed a task set before her. She'd need to do it discreetly, which was kinda hard considering she was surrounded by ninja everywhere. Seeing the reddish-brown hair of a familiar woman, she rushed forward, and despite all the children surrounding the Uzumaki ninja, she accidentally bumped into the crown princess. She feigned anger as she turned around on the person, but it quickly went to surprise as she saw who it was. She bowed low and apologized. Gomen Nasai, Kasumi-heim. I was into much of a rush. Kasumi nodded, a light smile on her lips, understandable. No harm was done. Sume nodded, and rushed off once again, planning to meet with the others at bar after she took her kids home from the Hyugas and put them to sleep. Kasumi rushed her children back to the pavilion, making sure Shun, her 5-year-old daughter, had her 2 younger siblings, 3-year-old twin brother and sister Yuko and Kenshin, under control, while she held her 1-year-old Yuto in her arms as she sat in another pavilion, beside her husband. The ride back to the palace was uneventful, and she, with the help of the maids, put her children to bed for the night, and went to her personal training area. Upon entering the safety of the dojo, she took the scroll Sume had passed to her earlier, frantic as she saw the handwriting of her dearest sister. Kasumi, by now I should have passed to the next adventure along with Minato. I gave birth to a son, and Minato and I named him Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. But you need to understand something. Remember the stories about our ancestors who sealed a demon within one of their strongest daughters, and the Kamagen was granted to her? Well, that is kinda what has happened to Naruto. When the Kyuubi attacked, there was nothing Minato or anyone could do but to seal the Kyuubi into Naruto. A Jinchuriki, they will call him. A disgusting name, but they will come to call him that. But enough on that. I don't have much time, but I have a feeling Sandame will hide Naruto's identity. In fact, for the first few years of his life, this is a good thing. Me and Minato have too many enemies, and if they find out about Naruto not only being our son, but also a prince, well, you know what would happen. The Namikazes have been in hiding for years, as you know, so I don't expect them to find Naruto until he is 8 or so, and Jiraiya-sensei won't come around until he is 12. Tsunade, I don't know if she'll ever see her adopted grandson, though I hope she will. This will be cruel to you all, but please don't claim Naruto as family until he is a year to being a genin. Make sure father understands that this is for his grandson's protection. And only when Naruto is a chunin can I let you tell the world about his status. I know you didn't do that with me, but his situation is different. Because of the Kyuubi, it will be hard for him, and he will need all the help he gets. If you want, train him in the bloodline, and give him the last secrets of the Uzumaki. The Kamagen that my son will wield is going to be powerful with the backing of the Kyuubi, and he will need the help of the last whirlpool ninja to guide him. Also, the kunoichi who gave you this, Inuzuka Sume, is one of my dearest friends. And undoubtedly she is planning along with some others to train my son, as well as other things. Maintain contact with her to stay inside the realms of the plans, and keep tabs on my son, our Senpuu Oji. I have some scrolls sealed away for our parents and brothers that I ask you give to them, along with my whirlpool Hitei, which I want you to give to Naruto as a peace offering of sorts. Besides that, there is really nothing left for me to say, that I have not already said. And anything I want to say can wait the long time before you join me in death, dear sister. So, this is my goodbye. Ride the wave with no fear, sister, for your journey is long from over. See you in the icelands of our ancestors. Love, Kushina. Kasumi let her pale blue eyes cry, as she read it again. Kushina, her dearest sister, was a baka. She smiled to herself, and planned to do everything her sister asked of her. This was her nephew, her sister's son. She would do anything for him, as would her brothers once they learned that Naruto lived. And gazed upon the Hitei her sister entrusted her with. Kushina had still worn it through the years along with her Konoha Hitei, a mark of her stubborn pride. But it was for that Kasumi would gladly give it to Naruto, and she would tell him all the stories of his mother, and of the traditions of Whirlpool, and he will earn his Uzumaki blood. What she despised was the idea of waiting so long for her family to reunite with their lost little Maelstrom. And there he goes again. Who wants to get him this time? Said one of the Anbu, who had been playing cards in the lounge of Anbu headquarters. The boy Naruto was now a year old, and quite the handful. When he was only 5 months he started crawling, and was pretty much a racer on all fours. And very shortly after that, he was walking tall, though he could be rather clumsy and hit things a lot. This provided great entertainment for the men while the women fused over the little charmer. And when he started teething, all the women tried all sorts of remedies to make him feel better. But it was when one of the men rubbed the boy's gums with a little alcohol did the babe hush up and chew his soft rubber toys. After Naruto got walking, he was quick to run, and it surprised all of them with the speed a 7-month-old could possess. Then again, to most of them that knew his pedigree, it shouldn't be a shocker. The boy was scary smart at times, and could smell people out and who was where, they learned. Though, he also learned about ramen within 8 months of age in exchange. They had to fight him to make him eat more than the heart attack noodles. Naruto was a light in the Anbu headquarters, compared to the abysmal way of life they were used to. He gave them normality, somehow. He gave them fast-paced 1-year-old hell, and he never knew just how grateful they were to have the innocent rowdy bundle of sunshine. Bam! The Anbu in the lounge turned to see the bright blonde on the floor, tears spilling from his watery blue eyes, though he refused to cry out loud, trying really hard to be a big boy like everyone told him to be. There was a deep gouge in his forehead, and blood was dripping down his forehead to his cheeks and nose. Within seconds, he was scooped up into the comforting arms of one of the Anbu, saying he was a good big boy, and let the man look at it. Naruto was sat on the table that had previously been used for cards. The Anbu started crowding around the table, all of them trying to make sure he was all right, and one of his caretakers, a woman with pink hair and wolf mask, came forward with a first aid kit. She made him sit still as she cleaned the blood off, but then she and everyone else in the room froze. He blinked at them, confused, and then felt something weird. His head wasn't hurting anymore. Lifting a chubby hand to his forehead, he realized that there was nothing there. This made him smile brightly, and he laughed out loud. "Okami, it hurt no more," he said in his childish broken speech. This seemed to unfreeze everyone, who patted the boy on the head, or in case of the wolf-masked woman, she brought him into her arms and held him, and with the help of several others, they helped tickle the blonde into laughing loud and in squeals. When he couldn't breathe anymore, they quit, and he was passed into the arms of a bear-masked man, who refused to relinquish his hold of the blonde, and Naruto settled down, seeing as someone brought him food. It wasn't ramen, sadly, but it was really good, and they said it would help him grow really tall like them. Something called broccoli and beef with a glass of milk. Ah, they could all hear the baby scream come from the designated room of one blonde. Fear gripped into more than one, as did apprehension. How had anyone gotten past them all? Yeah, they had a party the night before, but still, it shouldn't have affected them too much. More than one person ran to the blonde's room, frantic in their charge to kill anyone who would dare harm the little boy, especially among their presence. It didn't take long for them to see that there had been no intruder, but in fact that Naruto had awoken from a nightmare. He was curled into a ball to protect himself, as he was scrunched up against the wall of his bed. There were a few tears in his eyes, and they could hear muffled whimpers coming in his direction. The Anbu settled their nerves down, seeing as there was no physical harm to the boy, and some went back to sleep, while several stayed in the room to provide a comfort for the small child. One of them walked forward slowly, a young teen with a dog mask, and he swooped down to capture the frightened blonde in his arms. Upon seeing people he knew wouldn't hurt him, Naruto transferred swiftly from the bed to hold onto the slightly older boy, curling his body into the warmth and his small hands clenched onto his clothes with all his might, which for a child was extremely strong. He was starting to get rocked, the hand soothing on his back as he was calmed down, and his whimpers ceased. When he was calm he looked up to the masked dog, and muttered, "Gomen." He heard several chuckles from the adults, and the older boy's arms just tightened around the blonde. "Ma, what was so horrible, Naru-chan?" The blonde almost whimpered again at the memory of his horrible dream. Naru-chan had dreamed of bad people. The ones that wanted to hurt Naru-chan. They got Naru-chan. He felt himself being held closer to the teen, and he noticed that everyone else stiffened as well. A couple months ago, the old man, Naruto called him Gigi-san, in the cool hat had come by, like he did quite a lot, and said that Naruto needed to start entering the village more often. Naruto wasn't supposed to hear this, but he also heard that they were going to be taking him to the orphanage when he was 3, because he needed to be with children his age. He heard that some of his guardians protested, but Gigi-san told them it was an order. Whatever that was. So, the almost 2-year-old was taken out into the village, though his guardians were hiding. The first month of going out alone was okay, but he always had a lot of people glaring at him, and he could hear the mean things they said about him. A lot of them threw things at him. This confused poor Naruto because he never did anything to those people. But, one day, Naruto had gone out on his own, and in a game that he created, hid from his guardians, because no one else would play with him. The blonde then realized this was a bad idea, as he was knocked out and taken to someone's basement, and a lot of people came to hurt him. They were about to do something real bad after they had beat him up, but his guardians had found him, and they were taking away the bad people to EBJII. EBJII later came to him and hugged him in front of everyone, which he never did before, preferring to keep his emotions in check in public view. Naruto learned after that never to leave his guards. That had been a month ago, but it still scared him, along with all those other times he got hurt really bad, or someone said mean things to him. Gigi-san tried to hide it from him, but Naruto was smart, and he understood what assassinate was, despite not even being 2. He spoke up again, fiddling with Dog Mask's armor. "Why do they hate Naru-chan?" Naru-chan did nothing. One of the others came to sit on Naruto's bed, while the others came in closer around him. The young woman with a snake mask took him from Dog Mask's hold, and she held Naruto just as tightly. "Because they are hurt, Naru-chan. What they do is wrong, but they are hurt very deeply. So they take it out on you." Naruto wasn't satisfied, and pouted. "But why Naru-chan?" The teen girl sighed quietly, though in her head she was impressed that the blonde was not so easily deterred. "We can't tell you until you're older, Naru-chan. Just trust us when we say you are not what they call you. You are Naru-chan, and that's that." Naruto nodded with her explanation. The adults always told him to wait until he was older. He hated it, but he knew no matter after much pestering that they still won't tell him. But that didn't solve his problems of his bad dreams. So, he ended up going to bed with Dog Mask, who held him to make sure he wouldn't fall off the bed. It was nice, and he had no bad dreams. There were only a few things that 2-year-old Naruto hated with great passion. One of them was hospitals. He had to go there once in a while. It's not like the people there were mean. By no means were they mean to him, even when Gigi-san and his guardians weren't there. In fact, they were extremely nice, especially the ladies who always hugged him or pinched his cheeks. Well, the people who worked there did. The other patients were really mean though. No, he hated hospitals because of the horrid smell. It was disgusting to his advanced senses, and he could hear all the sick people. It gave him the chills every time. And what was worse, was the evil needles they sometimes poked into him. They said it was to make sure he was a healthy boy, and to make sure he could grow big and strong. But it still hurt a lot, and it was just weird. He heard from Jiji-san, eavesdropping again with his really good hearing, that Naruto was very much like his father in the respect of how he felt about hospitals and ramen. This pleased Naruto very much, to see that at least someone agreed with his opinion. It was not an irrational fear. And to know his dad, even though he had no idea who he was, loved ramen just as he did made the blonde cheerful that entire day in the village, though when Jiji-san asked, he just said it was a nice day. Jiji-san didn't need to know everything. It was Jiji-san's rare day to take Naruto out into the village, meant to give the blonde protection without his guards for once. Naruto learned a lot of things, like how the village functioned, and why it was necessary to have civilians. He also learned why everyone liked Jiji-san. He was a Hokage, and they were to be respected, as did other Kages from other ninja villages. He left Naruto at the Hokage Tower, telling the blonde to run straight to the Anbu headquarters, and even though Naruto did just that, he was still attacked. It wasn't any shinobi, but a few civilians that cornered him in an alleyway. They beat him up, really hard, but left when they saw the boy lying motionless on the ground in his blood, and not breathing. They snickered as they ran off, pleased with killing him, but the second they had left the alley, Naruto stood, wobbling on his good leg, and quickly took to the shadows and went on his way to his home. When he got there, he wasn't surprised that no one was there, as almost everyone had a mission today or were off to see their own families. It took him a good 10 minutes, but he found the first aid kit, and tried to clean off the blood first. Only to be caught by some of the returning adults. They were stunned at seeing Naruto in the kitchen sink, sitting on the counter, his clothes torn, and they could see several of his bones were broken, and his right eye swollen from a black eye. They were deeply angered, and helped Naruto clean up and fix up, getting rid of the poison in his system. And the weird thing happened again as his body began fixing itself, and he was quiet as he felt his bones fix themselves. When they asked who did this to him, he merely shrugged his small shoulders. They all are the same now. It took a couple seconds to understand what he actually meant, but then he surprised them with his next words, a stern determination on his face. I am going to be Hokage one day. Then they'll understand that they can't beat me. These words struck a chord in the ANBU's hearts, and that look was so familiar, once on the faces of two strong people. And then they realized he was talking like an adult now, instead of his cute baby way. It was a mix of sadness and pride that Naruto had taken the first step. He didn't like this. He didn't want to leave this place. It was his home, and here he was protected, and people wanted him. But Jiji-san had said it was for the best, and that Naruto needed to grow up with kids his age. So, with a heavy heart, he held hands with Dogmask as he was taken to the village orphanage. He could already tell it was not going to be fun here. The head lady sneered at him, but she was forced under Jiji-san's order to board Naruto there. He was shown around the place, with Dogmask holding his hand throughout the whole thing. The other adults were looking at him just like the head lady. It really wasn't going to be fun here. When he was shown his room, the lady left them to go do something else, so Naruto had time to say goodbye to Dogmask, since he had already said his goodbyes to everyone else. The older teen crouched to Naruto's level, and took off his Anbu mask, and Naruto took off his mask for the last time. Kakashi Ni-san smiled at him, before giving Naruto a hug. You gonna be good for us, Naru-chan? The just-turned 3-year-old nodded, solemn. Kakashi ruffled his soft blonde spikes. We can't come out and play as much as we used to, but we'll try to once in a while, Naru-chan. Now, be a big boy and give me that smile of yours. Naruto did as asked, and that foxy grin was on his face once again. Kakashi grinned back, kissing Naruto on the forehead, and then placed both masks on his face again, standing his full height. I'll see you in a few years, Naruto Oji. And then he disappeared in a flurry of leaves. You demon brat, why don't you just die? He was slapped hard, again, by the head lady of the orphanage. He had just come to her office because he got into a fight with the other kids. Or really, they got into a fight with him, for absolutely nothing. He was just sitting there by his favorite swing, doing nothing, and he gets surrounded by the kids. One of the kids sneered that he wanted to play on the swing, and Naruto stood to give it to him, turning his back to let them play. But then they attacked him. Ever since the first day of living there, they had been just as mean as the adults, which he discovered quickly was because the adults told them to be mean. So, when he fought back to defend himself, one of the kids ran screaming to an adult and said he was picking a fight yet again. And then his punishment was isolation, which he much preferred discipline from the adults, especially when they learned of his fast healing and all other things. An everyday occurrence, along with taking anything he had except clothes, and he was given horrible ones, taking away his blankets and toys, and then he went without food on many occasions. This was his life for the past year. He hated it, no one wanted him, and the Anbu couldn't guard him every day like they used to, so more than once, he was thrown to the adults of the village, and ended up in the hospital. But today was his birthday, and he had a plan. Jiji-san had asked for him to go to the Hokage Tower, and when he got there, he'd ask the old man to get him out of the orphanage. He had no evidence of what they did to him, but if Jiji-san wasn't going to listen to him, he would simply leave the orphanage, along with stealing back all his things from the other children. The adults didn't think he noticed. Stupid civilians, as he remembered many Anbu calling them that. So, as he was walking through the village, minding his own business once again, he saw the festival preparations for the infamous day of October 10th. Surprisingly, a lot of people were too busy at their work to notice him. Until the back of his ragged clothes was picked up, and his body was in the air by the scruff of the neck, and he found himself in the clutches of an angry-looking man. He smelled really bad of that stuff called alcohol, and a couple other things that Naruto couldn't name. He was an already ugly man, but the ugly sneer on his face was worse. Fucking demon brat, how dare you walk around and act like you own this place? You should have died the second you were born. Naruto was speechless for a few seconds, before he glared back at the man. Let me go. I didn't do anything to anyone. The man had a harsh laugh. Didn't do anything? You killed my wife and daughter, you fucking scum. With that, he smashed the side of Naruto's head with the glass bottle of alcohol, making it break and tear some of Naruto's skin, while the contents of the bottle dripped on him. But Naruto was used to this, and the pain. He didn't let a tear come within miles of his eyes. He just glared at the man, the side of his head bleeding, while the crowd around them watched, ready to join in pulverizing the demon. For some reason, something was heavy in the back of his mind. Not like it hurt, but there was a pressure that he couldn't explain, except that it wanted to be released. I've never done anything in my life. I've never killed anyone. This incited more people, and before long, he found himself being hauled off to the forest, with quite a handful of people ready to hurt him for no reason. It wasn't long for him to be thrown to the dirt and grass floor of the forest near Konoha. They proceeded to insult him, kicking him hard, and even a few stabs with knives or anything else they could find. The pressure in the back of his mind continued, until it started getting unbearable. Naruto, deciding to apply chakra that he had learned from watching others, did just that, and then something weird happened. He had been in the center of the crowd 1 second, and the next, he was beside one of the trees farthest from them. The civilians looked around, confused, and spotting him, that look of fear and hatred came to their faces. A few started running forward, but on instinct, Naruto clapped his hands together. The chakra in them somehow made the trees move, because next thing he knew, there were tree limbs whapping the people out of nowhere, and he was being protected by some encasing. After a few seconds, he realized he was inside the tree, and using the chakra again, he got out, only to see that the people were all on the ground, moaning or knocked unconscious. Fearful of them getting up anytime soon, he ran from the forest all the way to Hokage Tower, his chakra still flaring, and for some reason, he was really fast, more than usual. He went up the flights of stairs, and before long, he burst into the Hokage's office, panting only slightly, a glare in his eyes as he saw the shock and horror on his Jiji-san's face. He didn't really notice the blood falling on the floor, or that his ragged clothes were 2 more snips from falling off, or his body covered in deep gashes and bruises. His always clear voice evenly rang through the office to the Hokage and the Anbu. Either get me an apartment or I'm leaving and not coming back. Jiji-san was quick to doing as he asked, along with a stipend for him to live off of, and some new clothes, as well as another trip to the hospital with the guards of the Anbu back with watching him. When Jiji-san asked what happened, those blue eyes just turned to the old man, silently pitying the old man for being so silly. Jiji-san didn't need to know what people are really like. His new apartment was great compared to what he was so used. Of course, after living in it for a month, people found out where he lived, and they constantly destroyed the inside of it, writing on the walls such horrible things. They even burned his nightcap. What the nightcap did to them, he would never know. He only cried the first time they did this, but after that, it became normal. It still hurt him deep down, but he just kept going, not seeing the reason in crying over material possessions. They were replaceable, and as long as they didn't touch the instant ramen, everything was fine, and his day couldn't be put down. At least, that was what he made it look like. He remembered his Anbu guards, in which he only saw on rare occasions these days, and their masks. And then he remembered one of his lessons about how shinobi had to protect who they really were by wearing masks, both real and metaphorical. It hadn't taken a couple hours for someone to finally explain to the pestering blonde what that meant. So, he kept his feelings hidden, and created a mask of someone always happy. Sometimes, to make it realistic, he'd trip himself, to just stop those ugly eyes civilians glared at him with. Those eyes gave him nightmares all the time. After only living at his apartment for a week, he had found himself a place he could call his haven. A ramen bar, Ichiraku Ramen, owned by a really nice old man, and was helped by his short pretty daughter who was only 7. The old man, Tucci, had welcomed Naruto to his shop without any hesitation. When Ayame had left to go to the back, Naruto asked why he was so nice to the monster of Konoha. The old man was shocked that a 4-year-old would say such a thing, and he reached across the counter and bopped Naruto on the head. With a stern frown, he said, "You are no monster, and definitely no demon. Any who say that are blind fools, and are nothing but the real demons." This stunned the blonde, as the old man then smiled gently at him, affectionately ruffling the spiky blonde hair. "Now, how about miso flavor? I know you like beef, but try this one out." The blonde never knew anything, even ramen, could have tasted as good as that bowl of miso ramen, along with a platter of vegetables, chicken, and apple slices. The old man made him eat it all, saying that a young boy needed to eat healthy as well, or he'd never grow. And despite usually never listening to older people, this old man he'd listened to wholeheartedly. He had done pretty good to hide from them, but he knew he wasn't out of the clear yet. It was like this every time he came down the street late at night, especially when there were festivals going on, like tonight's winter festival. All he wanted was to join in and celebrate, but they always got angry, even when he hadn't done anything to anybody. Moving carefully to not make a sound, he snuck around, making his way to the forest, knowing he could lose them there. Since he turned 4, he was able to do 2 things kids his age couldn't. He could do cool stuff to the wood, one time making a tree grow around him and hiding from some drunk guys. It was fun, but not as fun as the stuff he could do with wind. He could go really fast, and he remembered the one time he knocked out a guy without even touching him. It was funny to see the guy's face go in shock before he was knocked out. But he never told Gigi-san about what he could do. Gigi-san always made him stop doing anything dangerous, which he thought was weird, but did as Gigi-san said. So he hid this little secret from him, wanting to play with his tricks because they were his to play with. But this time as he went into the woods, he knew he wasn't alone, like he always knows things. His nose told him that it was a sweaty person, who ate a lot of tomatoes and onigiri. He heard the sounds of panting breath and of a hollow thunk once in a while, that reminded him of when he practiced hitting targets with kunai. So, Tomato Guy was practicing. Deciding to give in to his curiosity, he followed the sounds and smell, coming in view of a very small clearing with a boulder and well-worn-out dirt ground. A small space training ground, with targets in places that were easy to miss if you weren't careful. At a thick tree, he saw a black-haired boy his age punching and kicking the wood, pale skin bleeding at his shins and knuckles. Naruto thought it always weird that when he bled, his skin healed quickly, like nothing had happened, but it was slightly tougher than before. And when the mean people beat him up, his bones healed quicker and thicker every time, as did his muscles. At least, that was what he heard the doctors say one time when he was hurt really bad 3 months after moving to his apartment that Gigi-san had to help him with the Anbu. They had always been nice to him, and sometimes played with him when Gigi-san wasn't watching them or when he was busy. But sadly, he couldn't find the ones he remembered the most. He wanted to play with Kakashi ni-san and Snake ne-chan again. EBJII hadn't been seen in a long time. The black-haired boy was panting really hard, and Naruto wondered what his name was. He looked like a fun guy to play with, and no adults were around to get mad at him. Nodding to himself, he decided to introduce himself. By scaring the shit out of the boy, of course. Bouncing behind him as he did his workout, he poked the boy on the shoulder, and asked in an excited voice, Anyo, do you want to play? This surprise of his made the boy whirl around at him on instinct, leg aimed for a roundhouse to the head. But a small tanned hand caught the ankle 5 inches from his face, again putting the black-haired boy in quiet surprise. Letting go of the leg, which slowly fell to the ground, the black-haired boy blinked at him, unsure and oddly shy. Naruto grinned at him, and asked again, do you want to play? The black-haired boy cocked his head a little to the side. His voice was gentle, but a boy's, but it told Naruto that he was shy. What would we play? Naruto's grin widened like a fox, showing his slightly larger than normal canines, but the shy boy smiled lightly as well. Naruto thought for a second, and then spoke up again, we can play ninja. It's a fun game, where we go on missions, and fight in battles, and save people from bad guys, and all that good stuff. We can do anything as ninjas. Sasuke seemed to think about this, before his face brightened, and wore a real smile, albeit a small one, his hand extended. Okay, my name is Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto shook the other's hand, and replied simply, I'm Naruto. Seeing Sasuke's confused face, the blonde quickly rectified it. Not the fish cake. My name means maelstrom, whatever that is. Sasuke shook his head. No, why don't you have a last name? Naruto looked down for a second, but quickly smiled even brighter, because I'm an orphan, and I have no family. Hokage Gigi-san says if people knew my last name, then a lot of people could get hurt. So he just says I'm Naruto. Sasuke was odd that his new friend talked to the Hokage, but then nodded, not wanting to lose a new friend by asking too much. Naruto started them off on a quest to Suna, to battle with giant lizards that were threatening to eat all the villagers, and just when they were drinking tea and playing shogi, as Sasuke says that ninja have to relax and meditate once in a while, or they would not be able to be good ninja. Someone stole Naruto the great Hokage away, by putting sleeping stuff in his tea when Sasuke had left the room. Sasuke, being the Hokage Naruto's greatest Anbu and friend, fought through marshes and forests to get to his Hokage, and fought off the Shinigami himself to make sure his Hokage would be okay. They played for hours talking in between their adventures, when Naruto yawned, laying back in the grass as sunset was coming over Konoha. I'm getting tired, and I haven't eaten since yesterday. Someone broke into my house again and destroyed all my food. Sasuke was still sitting up, mulling over something, and then he asked, Naruto, why is everyone mean to you? I've heard before that you were a bad person, and everyone should stay away from you, but you're not bad at all. Sasuke felt bad for his new best friend. It must be sad being really lonely, with no mama or papa, or anyone for that matter. Then he had a bright smile come to his face, a brilliant idea having popped into his head. Naruto, why don't you be my other older brother? One that no one knows about, so you don't get in trouble, and we can play all the time? If they could, Naruto's ears would have perked up, and if there was a tail, it would be wagging. The happy look in his new brother's eyes told Sasuke that it was a good idea. You're my Otuto? I get a little brother? Yay! And with that Naruto hugged his new little brother, who laughed at the blonde's actions. Letting Sasuke go, he noticed that it was getting really late. He poked Sasuke's side, and pointed at the sky. I think we should both go home now. I don't want you to get in trouble. Night, Otuto. With that, Naruto ran off into the forest, and Sasuke walked home, a smile on his normally shy face. When his mother asked what had made him so happy today, he laughed, I got a little better today. The next day, when Naruto came to play, Sasuke had a bento for them to share, and Naruto had onigiri and tomatoes for the first time, and Sasuke had instant ramen. It had been 3 months since their friendship took hold, and it was now April, 3 months till Sasuke's 5th birthday. Naruto was downtrodden for some reason when he came to the secret playground that day, having gone through a rather harsh day. Even with his happy mask, that Sasuke discovered as fake after a while, was completely down. Sasuke was extremely concerned for the blonde, not liking the expression on his face. What's wrong, Naruto-kun? Naruto's normally brilliant blue eyes seemed numb, as he looked the Uchiha heir in the eyes. Sasuke, I think I should stop being friends with you. This caused the raven-haired boy's heart to stop. How could Naruto ever say something like that? He stuttered, surprised by such words, what do you mean? Why? Naruto shuffled his feet, but still looked Sasuke in the eye. Because, I was talking to a little girl today, and I was just asking her if she knew where a library was. And then her Otou-san saw us, and he beat her right there. I don't want you to get in trouble for being friends with me. Naruto knew very well that Uchihas opposed him, hating his very existence. He didn't like the idea of his only best friend getting hurt because of him. And if it meant stopping being friends with Sasuke, it was for the best. Until Sasuke tackled him, and punched the normally on top blonde to the ground. Coal-black eyes glared at him, and his voice was extremely low and dangerous. It sent a chill down Naruto's spine at the vicious look on Sasuke's face. Naruto. This way Sasuke spoke his name like a deep fury was inside him. Well, it scared him, very much, but at the same time, drew out his own anger, and it came out in a terrifying growl. Sasuke. But despite his fear, the young Uchiha just sat on Naruto's chest, and the two glared at each other with dangerous glints in both their eyes. Then Sasuke spoke up, still glaring. It is my choice if I want to stop being friends with you or not, not yours. You can't decide something like that for me. Naruto growled, tossing Sasuke off his chest. Yes I can. Sasuke tumbled but recovered, and their eyes locked once again. The Uchiha snarled, no you can't. I know what's good for me. You're my friend, and that's how it's staying. I chose you as my friend, and that means we're sticking together. I don't care about my Otou-san or anyone else. With that, Sasuke stood, dusting his clothes off as Naruto watched, uncertain. Sasuke's eyes turned back to him, not as angry, but a glint of a threat. I will see you here tomorrow. I had to go home early and do some chores. And with that, the Uchiha left the clearing, leaving the blonde to think at what the two had said. He sat on the boulder, noticing that Sasuke had left the bento there, watching the sky change above, and knew that he would be back tomorrow. Sasuke was his best friend and brother, after all. He was aching everywhere. Even if the bruises and scars were gone, he still hurt, sore once again after another beating. He didn't have much of a chance this time around, as there were some ninja in this crowd, and he just knew if they saw him using chakra, it would have gotten worse. He hated it. Every time, they called him those horrible names. Monster. Murderer. Demon. A shiver ran down his spine at the last word, the one they said with such satisfied, malicious contempt. And no matter how much he fought them on this, their damning eyes fell to him, as if he truly was what they called him. Like he was born just to kill. He once had thought his parents were bad people, and that was why everyone hated him. Maybe his parents were the reason he was so hated. Maybe they were traitors. That was all his mind could understand, until he had asked Gigi-san one day. He had never seen that look on Gigi's face before. Like he was really angry, but really sad at the same time. He had turned to face the inquiring boy so fast that Naruto was sure his neck would have snapped. And Gigi spoke low, but Naruto knew that it was extremely serious. They were two of the greatest people I have ever known. Never doubt them. But of course, Gigi would never tell him who they were. So just why did everyone hate him? The only time he had ever fought was when he defended himself. And people had been attacking and attempted assassinations towards him long before he could remember. So, what had he done to be looked at by those disgusting and demeaning eyes? He had been sitting in bed for most of the night, sleep coming and going, but it was always restless as his mind was plagued with the same question. The dawn's rays of warmth were making their way over the horizon, creeping through the window by his bed, and he came out of the space between sleep and awake, noticing something strange. He smelled something, not horrible, but different. Blinking bright blue eyes open, he quietly got out of bed, suppressing the groan that came from moving too much. Everything just felt tender, every movement jarring him, but after a minute, he looked around his room. The floor had a shine to it that wasn't there last night, and his pile of scrolls had been messed with. Instead of lying in piles on the floor, they were stacked carefully beside his nightstand. His busted lampshade wasn't busted anymore. And he could see from his bed into his closet that his clothes were full of clean clothes again, when they had just been stolen 2 days ago. His eyebrow quirked, unsure if he was still dreaming or not. Standing, he shuffled towards the living room and kitchen. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, he yawned widely before sniffing again. The smell was a heck of a lot stronger in here, along with a few familiar scents. He smiled softly, remembering those particular scents, and the people that accompanied them. He slowly noticed that his apartment was cleaner than usual, the writings on the ceilings and wall completely off now, and now there was a replaced window, with a screen for both panes so it would be harder to throw rocks at. His couch had lost its muggy smell, and was brighter in color. There were other bits here and there that were different, but what caught his attention were the loaded plates and bowls on his table. Confused, he skirted over there, climbing into his chair, and then saw something amazing. His table was weighed down with foods of all kinds, and it all smelled so good. On the table beside a plate filled with pastries was a folded piece of paper. Grabbing it, he opened it and did his best to read the message. He wasn't all that good with reading, but Sasuke had been helping him, so he was able to understand what the message had said. Be strong, Naruto Oji, and get up every time you fall. There was no signature, but a symbol in deep red at the bottom, which he knew by heart like so many other symbols. It was a Anbu symbol, and the fact that it was the color of dark crimson made him smile softly. Colors dictated ranking in Anbu. Light red was for a common Anbu, black for Black Ops, blue was rare for junior squads, and purple for specialization. Deep red was reserved for only the leaders or captains of the organization. But sometimes it was given to the families and loved ones of the Anbu on a hidden body part. He grabbed a pastry from the plate farthest from him, a roll of some type that was warm and gooey and very sweet, and he just smiled while looking at that symbol. His sores just seemed to disappear as he ate from every plate. Naruto glared at the evil incarnate that taunted him, laughing at him because he just couldn't stop it. He didn't have to see it to know that Sasuke was rolling his coal-black eyes at him once again. Naruto, if you're going to be Hokage, you have to do paperwork. And I'm not doing it for you. Naruto wanted to cry out traitor, but sighed in his ultimate defeat. He knew Sasuke was right, as he had watched many times as Gigi filled out and read papers and scrolls. But that didn't mean he had to like it. Today, instead of training, they were playing ninja again, and for some reason, Sasuke said that Naruto had to do his Hokage duties, and instead of going off on their many journeys, Sasuke was making him red. He wanted to fight back with the younger Uchiha, but he knew Sasuke was right. So, he was currently reading up on the mission of a little ugly duckling that had lost his family, as he had already read up on the dangerous missions about the kid with a growing nose problem, the ninja that pretended to be a frog and get pretty girls to kiss him, and that one about a demon disguised as an old woman living in a candy house, luring in children to eat them. That last case had been very hard, and he himself had to go save Sasuke from the demon when Sasuke had decided to go vanquish it. The ugly duckling mission was rather easy, really, once he learned that the ugly duckling was just a switched egg, and was actually a really pretty bird called a swan. The only reason the case was brought before him was because some claims about some silly thing called territory. He waved over the Uchiha, who was currently practicing stealth, which he was learning from Naruto. The Uchiha quickly tottered over to the makeshift desk that the boulder made for the Hokage, who sat in a borrowed overly large bathrobe from Sasuke's mom, and a funny-looking hat that his mom had in her drawer, but she never wore, surrounded by scrolls and books. Sasuke, go deal with this. Sasuke took the book with a very serious expression on his face, scanning the pages carefully. What do you want me to go do? Naruto nodded, now shifting his attention to new mission scrolls. Stop the fighting. The ugly duckling was in the right, and now the pond is his. Make the silly ducks leave. Sasuke nodded, before running off to go solve the problem, running to the stuffed toys that were the ducks and swans fighting. Now, Naruto was reading about some kid named Jack who was jumping over candlesticks, and kept the neighbors up. Really, what was this Jack thinking? Jumping over candlesticks wasn't a ninja skill, or was it? Neither of the boys knew that a score of highly trained shinobi were watching them at play, and were for the most part, trying not to wet themselves from laughing so hard. One of them was smart enough to take pictures of the Uchiha berating the stuffed toys, and the even better picture of one Naruto, sitting on the boulder, surrounded by his work, with a serious look on his face, while wearing a bright red bra on his head and a woman's white bathrobe. The Anbu truly had to love Naruto, as he provided the greatest entertainment and opportunities of blackmail. The boy needed a photo album, anyways. Sasuke's birthday was coming by closely, and Naruto was having problems. He couldn't really go to stores to buy anything, even when he tried that henge no jutsu he learned a long time ago. Until he got the great idea of playing a trick on everyone. He was always good at that. He knew stealing was a bad thing, even though they stole from him, but he felt that what he was going to take was reimbursement for all that they've done to him. Quite a decent trade, he had to say, since he wasn't even scraping the surface on what they owed him. So, the owner of his apartment building was missing a couple blank papers and pencils. The lady below him 2 floors was missing a clothesline and pins. Then that really mean man that lived on the first floor with the ugly cruel cats had somehow lost his kunai, explosive and smoke tags, and ninja wires from his old days. He was laying on the floor, drawing on one of the pieces of paper about how the plan was to be executed. He may only be 4, but he could read people rather well, including shinobi. This used to freak out his Anbu guards and Jiji-san a lot, as careful-built masks were torn in seconds from an extremely observant blonde who liked faking his absent-mindedness. It was really funny, too. So far, the plan was good, but he felt he was missing something. He had already staked out the places, making sure they were far enough from each other to not be too suspicious, and he even practiced his skills with wind to help him with this. He had learned something really cool, though it was on accident. He could make his wind surround the kunai. It had been when he was alone for a couple days, because Sasuke had a cold. When he tried on other weapons, he could do the same. Though, when he tried it with a tree, it blew up in his face. The splinters really hurt, but were worth the discovery. What was missing though? Why did it seem something was wrong with the very amazing plans? Looking closely at them, he smirked. Of course, it did help with stealth practice, and it would be a slap in their faces, proverbially. That word he learned from Sasuke. His foxy grin was lighting up his face as he prepared for tonight's mission. He checked Gama-chan, a Christmas present from Tucci, a green toad purse, that was quite full from the lack of spending Naruto did, unlike most orphans. Waiting for night to fall was by far easier than he expected, and to his surprise, he wasn't nervous at all with what he was doing, or the possibility of being caught. The thing is, there was no room for getting caught, and once that ran through his head, he nodded to himself, looking in the mirror to see himself decked out in his darkest clothes. There were no options but to do this right. Sneaking out of the building was a simple matter, as he went from his room at the top floor and onto the roof, and with practiced ease, tiptoed across one of the many power lines to the pole, and after shimmying down for a bit, he jumped onto the next roof, careful to make as little noise as possible even with his heavy pack. It didn't take long to get to the first shop, a clothing store with a mean man and his family living above it. He quieted the snicker that bubbled up in his throat and set to work. He had practiced since living in the orphanage on how to open locked doors, seeing as they put him in a locked closet quite often for no reason. He always carried a file or a paperclip, and it was no different tonight while entering the store through the back entrance. He came to the stockroom, and his eyes easily adjusted to the darkness of the black room compared to the moon's light in the alleyway. Quietly, he opened the door to the store, and set about taking the items he had previously targeted. Getting to work with the store, and setting the tags and everything else in place, he nodded at his fairly well done work. He'd have to thank Sasuke for that sealing book. It was kinda hard to understand, especially for 2 almost 5-year-olds, but after several dictionaries and inquiries from adults about random parts, they had pieced together quite a lot. And it was just a beginner's book. Naruto closed the back door and left the place unassumingly just as unharmed as he entered, and went to his next target, the grocers near Hokage Tower, and after that, the bookstore, and then weapons store. Yep, his rounds tonight were multi-purpose, and that just made it simpler, seeing as everyone would be on edge after this for a few months. And people thought the blonde was an idiot. Well, let them reap the benefits of underestimating one Naruto. Besides, he might as well keep his village prepared for ninja spies by forcing them to up the security. When dawn rose, Naruto was sitting atop the Yondaimi's head on Hokage Monument, eating some chips he bought, while looking through a pair of binoculars to see just how his targets were handling his beautiful work. He had picked each place specifically because of one factor. They were mean to him, and they each got up at about the same time. He had to say, it was genius to have everything go off at the same time in places streets away from each other. It made it harder to find him in the ensuing confusion, as they would expect him to be at each site. It all started the same, with the owner coming down in the morning to open up shop. They did their little things, stocking, checking the books, and making sure the display was all right. But the second they opened each door, boom, he giggled to himself at the mayhem he had caused in the streets of Konoha. He had specifically placed the explosive tags in places that very few walked, and he tweaked the seals a bit so that it didn't have damage, but the smoke and noise was very much alive. The store owners would then run to the door, but would trip over some well-placed wires that were designed to rise in with his chakra the second the explosion went off. And then they would fall face first into his smoke tags that would go straight in their faces. Turning their bodies around to cough, and directly across their field of vision, would be a letter beneath a black spiral. And when they opened each letter, it was a written inventory of exactly what Naruto took, along with a promise of them getting their reimbursement at a later date, and then his personal message. If I truly was a monster, you would never have made it to reading this letter when I was here last night. It was simple, and no name, but the spiral under it was there once again. He knew they would know exactly who the message was from. And he had no doubt that this would only provoke them. But this was satisfaction for all that they did to him. He felt it was just about damn time to find something to get back at them. Of course, his freedom was cut short when a few hours later, some laughing Anbu found him, and they made him describe how he did everything, at the promise of not revealing his trick with the wind. When he got to Gigi-san's office, the old man had that stern look on his face, but Naruto just silently slid a paper and an envelope of money onto the desk. Gigi-san read it, and his face lightened up a bit, but Naruto was still in trouble. He didn't have to return the items, as he was technically paying for them, with tax, but Naruto had to stay in Gigi-san's office for 5 months when he wasn't playing with Sasuke, and help out Gigi-san file, fill out, and work on paperwork. What Gigi-san didn't know was that Naruto was learning the office work of a Hokage's job, and he was remembering every bit of knowledge and wisdom Gigi-san told him. The day of Sasuke's birthday had come around, and since Naruto knew Sasuke would have to go home early, he made the Uchiha join him before lunch for their usual sparring and games. When they finally got tired, Naruto dragged him through Konoha and Sasuke discovered the place his best friend always talked about. Ichiraku was a welcoming sight on the hustling street, and even Sasuke had to agree the aroma coming from it was really good. Naruto tugged Sasuke's sleeve, and they raced into the restaurant, too short to reach the curtains with kanji on them, so they jumped to touch it slightly with the tips of their fingers. Scrambling up on the stools, Naruto was the first to yell out, "Gigi-san! 2 bowls of Hokage ramen." The old man turned around, surprised Naruto would order such 2 big bowls at a time, and discovered that a dark-haired boy was beside his favorite customer, a big smile on his face. He smiled, guessing that this was the best friend and brother of the blonde. Coming right up, Naruto-kun. He listened to the two jabbering on about something Naruto could do with the wind. Curious, he asked what they were talking about. Naruto, slightly nervous of spreading such an important secret, rubbed the back of his head, reminding the cook of the boy's father. He wasn't as blind as others to the resemblance of his favorite customer Naruto to the Yondaime, who had come to his shop all the time throughout his youth, and a transparent image of the past blonde came to mind, sitting exactly where Naruto sat, the center of the counter, near the cook and the back door. A soft smile was placed on Tuchi's face. Naruto would undoubtedly grow to look exactly like his father, but he reminded the ramen shop owner of his mother as well at certain times. "I won't tell anyone, Naruto-kun. Ichiraku code of honor." This made Naruto smile up at him brightly, and without further prompt, he pulled out 2 kunai. "I might do some damage. So I'm sorry ahead of time." Tuchi waved him off, already having a feeling just what was about to happen. "This is a regular kunai." He threw at the wall to his right. Tuchi smirked, just where Yondaime had thrown it. "And this is a kunai with wind chakra." There was a glow around the kunai, a whitish blue, and it was thrown besides the plain kunai. And proceeded to cut through the wooden wall, and embed itself deeply into the stone wall of the building next door. Tuchi grinned, ruffling the blonde's head with a deep sense of pride. His father had only started learning that when he was 10, while his son wasn't even 5 yet and seemed to understand the basics. Well, I say that was worth a celebration. 2 bowls of Hokage ramen, on the houseboys. Both boys had that shocked happy expression on their face, and Tuchi just laughed to himself as he put the large bowls and platters of healthy foods beside each boy, before turning back to his work, hearing them whisper excitedly. After finishing their very hefty meals, Sasuke almost ready to turn into a filled balloon, they went to Naruto's apartment for a quick nap, and woke to the alarm 2 hours later, and then Naruto gave Sasuke his next present. Or first, since Tucci took the whole buying lunch out of the deal. It was a nothing extravagant or nothing expensive. To be honest, he himself thought it was plain, and this is coming from the kid who put monks to shame with his lack of worldly possessions. But he knew Sasuke would like it. It was a small kit, with shuriken and kunai, blunted edged by some jutsu, and lots of ninja wires and a couple smoke tags. Along with the kit was a small scroll on learning how to use all these items and techniques with ninja wires. Sasuke was for some reason very much infatuated with ninja wires, and if Naruto was older and more knowledgeable, he would have cracked many jokes about the use of items that bind someone. But he was a 4-year-old, so he simply thought of giving a gift to his only friend. Upon seeing his gift, Sasuke tackled his friend into a tight hug, and his usually shy face was smiling brightly at him. "This is the best, Naruto." Yep, the blonde knew it was well worth his punishment of staying at Gigi-san's office for many long hours. Sasuke was in a dilemma. You see, Naruto's birthday was tomorrow, and the Uchiha really didn't know what to get him. Sure, he knew Naruto had a strange love for toads and foxes, and an even stranger love for the color orange and spirals. But what do you get a guy who was simple, and didn't have much because people constantly stole from him? And then it came to him like a ton of bricks. He pooled together all his money, borrowing some from his Itachi ni-san, and he went to the store. It seemed rather odd to the owners, why an Uchiha, especially so young, would want a safe and a door lock, but Sasuke shrugged them off. Seeing that the safe was in hand now, he had to make sure Naruto was occupied. He knew that Naruto went to the Hokage Tower when he wasn't with Sasuke, as he had some punishment for one thing or another. So he waited one morning while Naruto finished getting up, and he left the apartment through the front, running full speed as if he was late. Making sure he wasn't coming back, Sasuke hefted the rather heavy metallic object up the 6 stories apartment building. It was rather comical, he had to admit to himself, that he was dragging the safe and pack of objects around, but he had a mission in mind, and he'd be damned if he didn't get it done in time. Opening the always unlocked door, he took off his shoes in the entranceway, and continued taking the safe to Naruto's bedroom, steadily ignoring the horrible written words on the walls. Looking into his pack, he took out the screwdrivers, and set to work on unloosening the floorboards at the foot of Naruto's small bed. It didn't take long, and he set about hollowing a place out, using the borrowed saw to away the vertical floorboards, and then putting the safe down below to face the ceiling. Using the saw and super glue, amazingly not sticking himself to it, he created a cover for the hole, and padded it. Now that that was done, he went to the front door, taking out the old useless knob and putting in a lock, in which were 3 keys, one for Sasuke, one for Naruto, and another just in case Naruto forget the original. He had to use a chair to put in a slightly higher lock. Nothing special, just a simple bolt, but it gave that extra sense of security. Finished, he got to work on the apartment itself. Naruto was quite normally a very clean person, and didn't care too much for leaving behind any messes, and was daily cleaning up the small apartment. So, Sasuke set himself up to wash the walls. If anything, he would use his extra money to buy paint. The white walls were kind of boring. All it took to get out the writings was lots of soap and Uchiha cleaning power, and it was gone. The 2 windows he could do nothing about, except board it up with some of the extra wood, and Naruto could use it to block the glass at night. Packing up all the extra items, Sasuke left to return some of the items, and then head over to their secret place, and wait for Naruto there. It didn't take long, and the 2 just decided to head over to Ichiraku Ramen, and had their helping of Hokage Ramen and the extra platter of healthy foods, on Sasuke's wallet this time. Naruto told Sasuke that he didn't plan on coming out of his apartment that night, and Sasuke grinned to himself. When they finished up eating, and chatting about whatever for about an hour, the 2 walked to Naruto's apartment, and when the door wouldn't open, the Uchiha's arm came forward, with a silver key in hand, and put it in the new door lock. Naruto turned to the Uchiha, who only smiled, before dragging him into the entrance, and showed Naruto the extra lock at the top. And without any chance for the blonde to ask about the locks and clean walls and floors, Sasuke pulled him into his room, and then pulled out easily hidden hideaway door in the floorboards, and Naruto saw the safe sitting snuggly in the floor. Honestly, this was the nicest thing anyone ever did for him. Never mind the Anbu or Gigi-san or Tucci Gigi-san, even if they were very important people. Sasuke went so far as to give him something he hadn't felt since living with the Anbu. With a safe for precautions. Turning to the very proud but hesitantly waiting Uchiha, he smiled at him gently as tears brimmed his eyes. Sasuke was surprised, never seen this reaction before, but it didn't take long for him to understand just why. Naruto would never smile at civilians like this, because this is the real Naruto, who rarely ever came out in front of people, scared of the world seeing who he was. Sasuke smiled back softly, happy that his friend was deeply pleased. Sasuke left to go to the festival with his family, and Naruto locked the door and boarded the windows, and for the first time in a long while, he slept very well in his apartment, curled up in his sheets as blissful dreams of his Hokage days surrounding him. It was really cold, was all Naruto could think. The winter had finally come again, and snow fell from the sky to drift upon the village of Konoha once more, like one of those snow globes he had seen in a shop's window. He was in his only warm outfit, a gift from the Anbu, he knew, with light brown pants with several pockets, a thick black baggy t-shirt with an orange Anbu symbol on the front, and a large dark orange jacket with a large fur-lined hood, and a red toad on the back with the red swirl lined in black above the toad's head. He had done his grocery shopping, or really, put the groceries away that Ayame had once again put in front of his apartment door. It had become a custom, really, that every 2 weeks, Ayame or Tucci came over to his apartment, and put groceries in the small apartment for the blonde, and making sure he was eating his healthy food. Old man Ichiraku had come up with this plan a long time ago, seeing as Naruto couldn't go shopping for himself without buying rotten foods for outrageous prices, and with little hesitation, Naruto had given the ramen shop owner the ability to budget the blonde's money that he got from the village, and bought him food, and when Naruto told him about an outfit going bare, got him a new outfit. Naruto didn't know why, but he knew he could trust the old man, so he pretty much gave him free rein of what little money he had, though at the price of having to take lessons from old man Ichiraku about budgets and whatnot. Stopping in the middle of the wide and empty street, he turned his gaze to the sky above him. The world was extremely pretty. The sky was a mix of grays, whites, and blacks, and though he loved sunny days, he liked snow and rain just as much. A couple flakes fell on his tanned whiskered face, melting at the warmth his body possessed. He smiled softly to the heavens above him, a shiver running down his spine. It was oddly silent, everything muffled in this snowfall, making Konoha seem very much like a ninja village. After a while, he managed to move his eyes from the sky to the Hokage monument, slightly hindered from his view by some of the buildings, but able to see them if he turned his head just right. His feet started moving again, knowing his destination by instinct, and it wasn't long until he found himself on the street he traveled the most. Even from 50 feet away, he could smell the enticing aroma of Ichiraku, in the middle of its dinner rush. A foxy grin came to Naruto's face as his feet walked just a little faster, crunching the snow beneath him, and he found himself in front of the greatest place in Konoha. Jumping a little, he hit the curtains that hit one of the small bells, announcing his presence. He saw a few people in the booths to the sides of the restaurant, and at the front counter were a couple adults. Right next to his customary seat in the middle was another boy, bundled up in black pants and a dark blue jacket with the Uchiha symbol, and the raven-haired boy turned to see the bright smile of his best friend, and returned a smile of his own. The bell had alerted the cook of another's presence, and seeing the familiar blonde climbing onto his middle stool, Tucci smiled brightly. "Ah, Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun already ordered for the both of you. 2 Hokage ramen will be ready in a bit." Naruto grinned. "Arigato, Gigi-san." Looking over to Sasuke, he asked, curious, "So, what's up?" Sasuke merely rolled his eyes, and shoved over a wrapped bundle from in front of him. Naruto blinked, then took his cold hands and unwrapped it with no prompt. What he found was a pair of black gloves, slightly big for him, and a large black scarf with red fire on the ends, with the Konoha leaf in orange. Laughing quietly, Naruto quickly put them on, wrapping the scarf around his neck a few times because of its length. He smiled broadly at Sasuke, grateful for the gift. "Arigato. Now we can go play in the snow a lot longer." Sasuke nodded his head, that shy smile on his face once again, and answered embarrassed. Of course." Naruto punched him lightly on the arm. "Quit doing that." The ground split with little force as the green stem grew, quickly going from that fresh green into an old brown, twigs and branches sprouting, leaves unfurling, and it grew about 6 feet before fruit started producing onto the branches. Naruto stopped, panting heavily and near exhaustion from all that work, but he had a brilliant smile at his work. He and Sasuke had been working on this for a while now, to help Naruto with his weird talents. The young Uchiha had gotten some scrolls and advice from his family, under the guise of training himself, and reiterated it to Naruto once he himself understood it. Looking to his right, Blue Eyes saw that Sasuke had a smile on his face as well, and with a little help, climbed the tree and grabbed one of the ripe red apples. Landing on the ground, he held the giant apple, curious, and with little hesitation, bit into it. Naruto asked, nervous, "Is it okay?" Sasuke nodded enthusiastically, taking another bite before tossing it to Naruto. "It's kinda sweet, but I think that's how all apples are." The young Uchiha sat down against the newly formed tree, watching as the blonde turned from plant making to playing with the wind around them, turning a forceful gale into a gentle breeze. It was always fun to play and train with Naruto, because he was unlike his cousins, who all did the exact same thing. The family taijutsu style was boring, and it always required the Sharingan to be at its best. But with the orphan that Sasuke claimed as brother, everything was different. He heard all the times people in his family said that no one was better than an Uchiha, and that his clan was by far superior to all. His own father, in the few times he paid attention to Sasuke, had told Sasuke that nothing could compare to an Uchiha, and to never associate with those lower than himself. But, becoming Naruto's friend was different. He didn't know how to explain it, and he never did for Naruto's peace of mind, but the blonde always managed to draw him in, especially with his unpredictable nature. There was no way of ever knowing, but Naruto gathered more attention and respect than all the high ninja clans combined. Of course, villagers and other ninja never showed it, but Sasuke just felt that Naruto had more to him than anyone else, especially after learning his best friend was raised with Senpuu the first few years of his life, and that even now, he had guards once in a while. Now, to some, it was nothing, but to a just-turned-6 Uchiha heir, there was something very important about Naruto. He never told Naruto for fear of scaring the blonde, but he had heard whisperings of a lost clan that could do things like Naruto. They had been gone for many years now, trying to rebuild in secret, away from Konoha and prying eyes, but even in their absence, their power was still revered, and even a lot of the older Uchiha grudgingly saw them as people to respect and obey, like the Hokage. Sasuke had looked up what he could about them, and learned that the fourth Hokage was one of them, in fact had been an heir, before his untimely death 6 years by defeating Kyuubi. But when he saw one of the few color pictures of Yondaime in the clan books, something clicked. Of course, the Yondaime's clan was renowned for aristocratic exotic looks, but the resemblance was too close to be ignored. But Sasuke would never tell his best friend, for fear of giving too much hope only to have it yanked from under him. Laughing out loud as Naruto accidentally whopped himself in the face with his wind, making him fall ungracefully on his butt, Sasuke just knew that his best friend was more worthy to be a Hokage than anyone else. Especially when said blonde got up and tackled the Uchiha, surprising the raven-haired boy once again with his speed and spontaneity. Almost every day they met up in the secret training area, playing or training together, and when they weren't doing that, Sasuke was helping the blonde with reading, writing, and math, along with the both of them training extensively to become shinobi. For a year and a half, the two stuck by each other. Amazingly, no one knew about their friendship, besides the Anbu that tailed Naruto, and he swore them to secrecy as their future Hokage. And they stayed quiet to his knowledge, hopefully. It was turning Naruto's 6th birthday soon, and the Uchiha didn't know what to get him, until he remembered that Naruto wanted to train harder in speed and strength, and find a couple jutsu and shinobi training tricks, but it was hard since Naruto couldn't go into the library. So at least Sasuke had something in mind. But how to get it was the problem. Days rolled by and the day was coming all the closer, and still Sasuke couldn't save up enough to get Naruto the chakra weights he saw at the store. With a sigh, he stuck with plan B, and went to the library, gazed through scrolls and scrolls, copying everything he could get his hands on, and had 8 scrolls for Naruto to take use of. At least for now. Having looked at all the information, there was a lot more to learn, so he planned to go there every once in a while, and the two could have more jutsu after they finished the first scrolls. The day came in which the festival of Kyuubi's death came, along with the great Yondaime. But Sasuke chose not to go with his family, explaining to his mother Makoto that he hated celebrating it. She merely nodded, and gave him a special bento tonight with a rather large package wrapped in brown paper with a string to carry it. Whispering into her younger son's ear, "Give him a hug, happy birthday for me, Sasuke-kun." He was shocked as he barely held onto the items, but she winked conspirately and nudged him out the door in his dark blue yukata with Uchiha fan on the back, black obi, and wooden geta, closing the door quickly and quietly. Taking the chance, Sasuke ran with items in hand to the forest, going to his hideaway tree that stored the scrolls he got for Naruto, putting them under his arm, and he carefully went to the clearing, wanting to get there first. Which he was, but only by a few minutes because Naruto showed up in a run, a laugh on his breath. Sasuke called him over, only assertive when his best friend was around, and he opened the bento to show a feast of sorts, just with sweets and some foods you'd see at the festival. There was wagashi, manju, doriyuki with red bean paste, mochi, yakisoba, takoyaki, special onigiri, sushi, and a small cake for the two to share, along with the teacups and thermos of green tea. While the two watched the sky, eating away slowly at the delicious meal Sasuke's mother made, when Sasuke remembered the presents. Quickly, he brought out his mother's gift first, saving his for last. Naruto unwrapped the paper, and both were surprised at what was inside. It was a very large gold yukata with red spiral on the back, meant for growth, and a black obi. Along with it was a pair of geta that were large to grow into. 2 masks were there to cover their faces, foxes, one blue and the other black. But at the bottom of the bundle were the exact chakra weights Sasuke was trying to get. They were small, like thick rubber bands, to go around wrist, ankle, thigh, forearm, and waist. Apparently, it could help your chakra control as well as give you more chakra, as it weighed you down and forced you to strengthen your muscles and speed your reflexes. Somewhat shy to give his gift of scrolls that to him didn't compare, he was surprised by the excited hug from the blonde, whose face was lit up like he had won the jackpot. The blonde grinned like a fox, and said almost reverently, "This is the best birthday ever. Especially these scrolls, we can learn so much more with them, Otuto." Sasuke smiled, and replied, "HN." Too shy and delightfully embarrassed to say anything else. They headed out of their usual hangout, Naruto putting his gifts in the safest part of his apartment, the safe box that was under the floorboards of his bed. It would be hard to find it, as Naruto made sure his entire floor sounded the same, just in case someone tried to steal anything. Donning the soft cotton yukata and geta, Sasuke had to say it looked good on his brother, despite it being rather baggy, but he helped fix what he could to make it look more fitting. With a smirk, Naruto put on the blue fox mask, followed by Sasuke with the black fox, and the two ran to the festival, and Naruto got to enjoy it like everyone else for the first time. They went through the game booths mostly, and then the food was delicious, though not as good as the food Sasuke's mom cooked, which they were saving over at Naruto's apartment for another time. Naruto even dared Sasuke to go to the kissing booth, which he did, and covered his blushing face with the mask while his best friend merely laughed heartedly. Naruto even won a pet baby koi fish, which Sasuke nearly shook his head at the ecstatic boy, while he played with his water yo-yo, and held onto the stuffed toys of a fox and a dog Naruto had won for the both of them. One thing Sasuke had to say about Naruto was that he had the most extraordinary luck. Walking back to Naruto's apartment, the blonde tied his mask to the side of his head, eating some barbecue on a stick, while securely holding his koi fish. The two were talking excitedly about all there was, when Naruto heard a sound in a nearby alley. Holding a hand up for Sasuke, the raven-haired boy immediately did so, listening into the night. A muffled scream came from the darkness, and they heard a resounding slap, followed by a man's curses. Quietly, they took off their geta and snuck up into the shadows of the alley, seeing a man beating a girl of 12, and her mouth was covered, tears falling as his hands were in places they couldn't see. And though the two were young, they knew what was wrong and right. This wasn't right by any means. A deep anger rose within Naruto, and Sasuke watched as his friend's body shook with great fury, as was evident on his face. Then, in the darkness, he saw a flash, and Naruto's blue eyes changed. They were pale silver now, with a gold ring around outer edge of the pupil. The iris was slit like a cat's, and 4 small black triangles were situated on the gold ring facing outward, like a compass. Somehow, the eyes swirled, and Naruto went into action. Koi fish and barbecue dropped as he sped forward with a force he never knew he had. Just as the man's hand was about to strike the girl again, Naruto caught it, glaring at the taller man with those terrifying beautiful eyes. "I don't know who you are, or what's going on, but you don't hurt girls." His blood was pounding in him, and just as the man was about to sneer, Naruto used some of his strength to pull on the man, accompanied by wind's help, and threw him against the opposing wall, without any form of exertion, and water from nowhere splashed on the man before turning to ice, freezing the man to the wall solidly. Sasuke was awed by his friend's display along with those eyes that he had never seen or heard of before. Grabbing the koi fish for the blonde, he waited for the blonde to come out of the alley, which he did without saying a word to the girl. "Seriously, Naruto, that was awesome. When did you learn to do that? And your eyes, they change. Do you know how to turn them off?" "No, but I'll try to find some way to do it. But it is really cool seeing with these. I can see in the dark." "So what the hell was that for? You said you could see in the dark." "I wanted to test it. I wasn't finished describing it, Teme." Saving that girl would be the start of many things for one blonde wonder named Naruto. Waking up to the dawn's inviting sky, Blue eyes opened as he felt something was off. He couldn't tell what it was, but it wasn't a threat, his mind told him. Getting up, he was still wearing yukata and obi that Sasuke's mom gave him as a present, and it was something nice to wear and sleep in his opinion. It was slightly chilly, but the fall still retained some of the summer's warmth, and he quickly brushed his hair and brushed his teeth, before he decided to go to his living room, his mind still trying to figure out that annoying feeling in the back of his head, like someone was. "Ohio, Naruto Oji, I see you are well this morning." Crystal blue eyes looked up in shock, and saw a man sitting at his crooked and old table. He had pale white eyes with no pupils, long coffee brown hair that was swept back, pale skin, and rather feminine looks, despite his very deep baritone voice. He wore a light blue male kimono with a darker blue haori jacket. The man smiled softly, noticing the blonde was frozen. "I'm not here to harm you. But we are going to be late to the meeting if you keep standing there." Naruto answered intelligently, "Huh?" The man stood up, showing his rather imposing height, and motioned for the blonde to follow, and he didn't wait as he walked out the front door. It only took 2 seconds for Naruto to unfreeze and run after the weird man, and was beside him as they walked to the richer area of Konoha. The area where ninja clans lived. No matter how many times the blonde pestered the man about where they were going and who he was, he got no answer from him, though he did get the guy to laugh, which made several people in the street have weird faces of shock. But the blonde didn't notice this, as he bounced beside this stranger who seemed really nice, and he felt no danger or instinct to run. So he had to be a good guy, like the Anbu. When they got to their destination, Naruto was in awe of the compound, with its greenery and vastness, and the old-style houses he only saw around this area. He always thought these houses were better, especially the tall houses. He noticed around the homes that there were many people who looked like this stranger, and all had the same type of eyes though with different shades. They all stopped to look at them, and bowed at the two before they went to work, whispering excitedly. Naruto figured that the stranger he was with was someone important. Entering the biggest house with 2 stories, he noticed there was a lot of shoes at the entrance area, and he again followed the tall pale guy as they entered the home, oddly quiet in the early morning, and he opened a decorated fusuma, sliding the door to show a large room that was laid down with tatami mats, a low table loaded with food and many people seating on pillows, and shoji doors open to the center garden of the home. Naruto entered after the man ushered him, closing the fusuma behind him, and he guided Naruto to sit down at the table, sitting beside a woman with red tattoos on her face and her dark brown hair wild and spiky, and the strange man sat on his knees beside the blonde, doing some seal with his hands. Unsure of what they wanted, the blonde asked, "Are you going to tell me what's going on now?" The adults around him chuckled, and the weird man who brought him there replied, "Of course, Naruto Oji. But we wish to introduce ourselves properly. I am Hyuga Hiyashi, head of the Hyuga clan. This is my wife, Keiko." He pointed to a woman who had a warm smile faced towards him. The woman beside him grinned, "My name is Inuzuka Sume, head of the Inuzuka clan." A man with long sandy blonde hair spoke up, joyful, I am Yamanaka Inoichi, head of the Yamanaka clan. And this is Nara Shikaku, head of the Nara clan. And this guy is Akamichi Shuza, head of the Akamichi clan. A woman with long pink hair and beautiful features smiled sweetly at him. I am Haruno Miyako, head of the Haruno clan. And before you ask, the hair is natural. And this quiet guy beside me is Aburum Shibi, head of the Aburum. A woman with black hair and eyes and pale skin smiled softly at him. I see you like your present. I am glad. I am Uchiha Makoto, Sasuke's mother. Naruto smiled brightly at her, arigato, for the gifts. It's really comfortable to wear, and the weights are a great help. And the treats were really good. The adults in the room smiled and chuckled at his manner. It looked like Makoto's son had rubbed off a little on him. Makoto nodded at the compliment, and Hiyashi took the room's attention as he started off. Naruto Oji, the reason we have called you here is for many, but for now, I think it best to tell you who your parents are first. We can't tell you everything about them, sadly, as you are not ready yet, but as it is, I think it's good enough to know who they are. The blonde's sole attention was on the adults, his face so readable it hurt. It was any orphan's desire to know who their parents were. Sume took this as her cue, and her arms encircled around the blonde's waist, dragging him into her lap. They saw the confused look on his face. He never had any attention from anyone that was positive besides Hokage, Anbu, and for the past year, Sasuke. So any form of love from anyone was scary to him. And Sume wanted to only hug him the tighter. She spoke softly, and his childish attention was focused on her. It made her smile. Your parents were the greatest people in the world, Naruto. But you have to promise not to get angry when I say who they are, as well as why the villagers hate you. Everything will be explained why it was hidden from you, but just have an open mind. And tell no one, especially the Hokage, that we have told you this. We have conflicting views on you should be raised. The blonde nodded decisively, and she continued. Your mother, her name was Uzumaki Kushina. Her clan came from the now destroyed village of Whirlpool. She came to Konoha and joined our forces. And she was placed on a team with Hiyashi here, and your father, Namikaze Minato. When they got married, she took on the name Namikaze Uzumaki, which you will hold as their heir. Both of your parents have bloodlines, so you are the carrier of both Uzumaki Dujutsu and Taijutsu, and the Namikaze blood. On the day you were born, was the Kyuubi attack. There was no other option, other than sealing the Kyuubi into a human child. The child had to have been newly born, as any other will be rejected as the holder of a demon. So, your father, the Yondaime, was forced to seal Kyuubi into you. He wished so badly that you would be treated as a hero, but the villagers and some ninja, the Kyuubi deeply hurt them, so they take their anger out on you. Naruto was crushed. His idol, the greatest Hokage, was his father. But his father, well, if there was no other way. If he was Hokage, and there was no choice, he would have never sealed into someone else's child if he wasn't willing to do it himself. But there was still that anger, especially at the villagers. But he didn't act on it, in a ways. Instead, his frustrations came out in tears, even though he swore to never cry again when he was 4. He didn't notice until later that he had been crying into Sun's shoulder, and she ran her fingers through his spikes. It felt really nice, it made him feel good. The adults stayed seated, watching every tear fall, the guilt building up, but they knew that from now on, things would be different. And this redeemed them, if only a little. After a while, his tears subsided, and Sume loosened her hold, but kept one arm around him, while she took a sip of her tea. His voice was slightly raspy. Arigato, for telling me. It means a lot, to know why, and who my parents are. It makes sense why Gigi-san never told me. He was afraid it would get out, and even I have heard of the Uzumaki clan, so he was protecting me from my name. The adults were surprised by his quick assessment and adult-like answer, but hid it well, knowing that his entire realm he was surrounded with that did not treat him as scum was Anbu, as Hokage was always busy. Keiko stood up, slightly wobbly because of her growing stomach, and went to a little tray, then served it to Naruto, knowing Hiyashi had probably rushed him out of the apartment to get as few people as possible to see them. Naruto was entranced by the meal, as it was different than his instant ramen, and it smelled fresh too. Looking at it closely, it was a bowl of rice, fish, steamed vegetables, slices of cheese, a glass of milk, and bright red apple, his favorite kind. The meal to him was small, but to an adult, it was huge and shusa-sized, and they all took note of the red apple and glass of milk. He had a particularly happy expression while eating those. Inoichi asked, while Naruto was taking slow bites on his prized apple, "So Naruto Oji, how was your day yesterday?" They all laughed to themselves as the blonde went into storytelling mode, much like his father, from playing ninja with Sasuke, the festival, and how he won a lot of things, and the scrolls Sasuke got him which he really liked, and even told them about the mishap with the girl. When they heard of this, all of them looked at each other to make sure they weren't hearing things. He had already had access to his bloodlines? Shikaku asked, his usually bored voice more interested. "Naruto Oji, how long have you been able to do those things?" The boy bit his lip, but answered with a determined face, "I've been able to play with the wood and wind since I was 4. I was trying to hide from some mean people, and needed to get away fast, and it just happened. And last night, my eyes did this weird change, and the water, ice thing to freeze the guy. It was weird." Sume asked, "Why's that?" "It's normal for bloodlines to wake up without prompt." Naruto shook his head. "No, I mean I felt weird. Seeing someone get hurt. I didn't like it. And when me and Sasuke play, I always play Hokage, and when he gets hurt, I don't like it even more. It happened before, this weird feeling. But it was really strong last night, seeing someone get hurt. I don't know, my body was really angry, and my blood began to heat up, if that's a way to describe it." The others seemed curious about this. They had heard Kushina describe it before, and Miyako confirmed it in her own ways. Like the body awakens, even when dead tired, and rejuvenates with chakra flooding, and it is in overdrive. A berserker, but someone still in full control, running on instinct and what the Kamagen showed them. Hiyashi was almost shaking. The idea of seeing the eye again brought back many memories. "Naruto Oji, put chakra in your eyes, and try to call up the Kamagen again." Nodding at what he was asked, and now knowing the name of it, he did as told, and they saw for the first time in years those gorgeous but terrifying eyes. Hiyashi nodded to himself. "You are still an apprentice of the eye. But it is amazing that you manifested the eye so early. Your mother had also manifested it early in life, around your age. And what you were saying, about your blood being angry, she told me before about the Uzumaki bloodline being close to a berserker clan, but with the eye, they had control. She says the blood boiled, especially when someone was getting hurt." Then Hiyashi took this time to bring out his present first, a scroll and a necklace. Naruto looked at it curious, before he explained. "This necklace was a gift from your father to your mother, to show the joining of Uzumaki and Namikaze. You were supposed to get one as well, but you inherit your mother's. Your mother's family Nindo is on the back of the clan crest, and your mother wanted you to wear this when you were 6. He put the small gold chain around the boy's neck, and with its length it dangled to his stomach. "And this scroll is meant for you to open. It's a blood seal, so it's meant for you." Taking this as a cue, Sume showed the blonde in her lap how to do it. He bit his thumb and swiped a little blood on the swirl, and the adults were fascinated with how quickly the thumb healed. They had heard and seen it before, but up close, it was still amazing. The silver eyes read the scroll, slowly and deliberate because some of the words were hard to understand, and there were teardrops here and there. He kept himself together, but took his mother's words to heart. There was even a little part of where his father had written, telling him where the two's secret archive was, and he was to tell no one but a trusted few. And that his adopted grandparents wouldn't show up for a long time, his paternal and maternal families were in hiding, and that his godparents, guardians and their old friends would look after him well, and to trust them, as they were his family in a sense. There was a promise of more letters, but for now this would be his only letter. His father had left some at the archive. Closing the scroll, Naruto smiled lightly and fiddled with the necklace. His parents must have really loved each other. When they saw him close the scroll, it was time for the others to give their own presents to the boy. Both items that his parents left him, and then items they got for him personally, everything put in summoning scrolls for him to open later. To the blonde, it was overwhelming, and his smile was by far the brightest they had ever seen. But what tossed the cake was when Hiyashi and Sume told him that he would be living with them. At his astounded glance, Sume ruffled up his hair. "We know you've been an independent kid since you were 3, but we're not letting you grow up on your own. So, for 2 weeks, you live with Hiyashi, and then the other 2 weeks, you live with me." We have a room set up for you here and my own clan's estate. And besides, this makes it easier to train you as well. As excited as Naruto was to hear of this, to have a home, but now he had two. And the idea that they were going to be training him. But still, there were two things nagging him. What about Gigi-san? And what about Sasuke? Will I be able to play with him? Makoto giggled to herself, answering for the others. Sasuke will still be available to play with you. Since his father isn't there often, Sasuke will be able to play and train beside you almost every day. And on days he can't, I will send a message in place. She didn't want Naruto to be too worried about Sasuke's relationship with his father, or really lack thereof. Fugaku was too concerned with her elder son and the military police force. He may oppose the blonde, but as Sasuke's mother, she had more right to say what Sasuke can and cannot do. And being with this bright blonde was the best thing for Sasuke. She knew it. Inoichi answered the other question. Hokage-sama will have no say in this, and if he opposes, it is too late. It's already been put in the system of your new living arrangements, and the civilians' village council has no say in shinobi affairs, and we've already had your stuff moved. Including your little safe. Don't look surprised, Naruto-sama. We are ninja. We haven't opened it, we just moved it for you. Naruto calmed down, but still pouted at the fact that what he thought was a well-hidden safe was well known. Shuza saw this, and guessed what was eating him. He tapped a finger to his chin, and voiced a thought. Well, you must admit, Inoichi, it was rather hard to find. Miyako rolled her eyes, played along. Yeah, if we hadn't been watching for it, we would have completely missed it. Naruto's face lighted up, and inside he was dancing. So, he and Sasuke had done a good job at hiding it. Seeing as the morning had passed by through the conversation, lunch had rolled by, and the adults needed to go do other duties, but promised to come visit Naruto for dinner the coming Friday, and this heightened the blonde's spirit. Taking all the scrolls in one arm, while Hiyashi held his hand and led him to his room and Keiko off to get lunch prepared. Taking one look at the room, Naruto was amazed at its size. It was a traditional room like the rest of the house, and there were tatami mats in the room, along with a room divider. The fusuma painted in the likeness of a field of cherry blossoms, and dragons, toads, and foxes were decorated around the edges. There was a low table with 4 cream cushions around it, and there was calligraphy on the walls with a decorative deep red silk fan with a dragon and phoenix on it. He saw that there was a closet, and it held only a few of his clothes. He had few to begin with, and they were only the undergarments. He had nothing in his old home to begin with, except for instant ramen, the safe, the bento, a potted plant, and his new baby koi fish, that had been put into a nice round glass bowl compared to his pot. The only problem he had was that all his kunai were gone. About to ask Hiyashi why some things were missing, the head of the Hyuga spoke first. I'll leave you to open your gifts alone, Naruto Oji. Someone will be over in a while to bring you to the lunch table. With that, he left and closed the fusuma door decorated with the swirls, toads, and water on it, leaving the blonde alone in the massive room. Deciding to ask later, thinking they were kind enough to give him a home in the first place, he placed the many scrolls onto the table, and then went to the large window to open it and bring some natural light into the room. He was even more pleased with the view, a garden and pond, with the forest not that far away, and he could see the Hokage monument just over it. Back to the task at hand, he sat at one of the cushions, and opened the one from Inoichi. A set of clothes that were very different from Konoha's style, and they were baggy for growth. The main colors were black, orange, red, and sometimes blue. Swirls were the main theme, and a swirl on the sleeve with 2 wooden toggles was on all of them. Some had fur included, and it was extremely soft. There was no the same out of the pile of 15 outfits, so he knew that he wouldn't have to wear the same thing over and over again like he was used to. Inoichi's note was about this style of clothing was from his mother's village, and she being a tomboy, wore mainly boys' clothing. So he designed and commissioned these for him to wear when training and for the academy. The other was from his mother. A rack of weapons, 2 spear-like things, 2 swords, and then a small one that looked like a dagger. They were all pretty to look at, but really sharp as he learned by touching the blades. The sheaths of sword and the tanto was decorated with something he didn't notice that much for now, as his attention was on the finely made rack itself. Knowing he'd have to ask someone to help him with putting that rack up later, he moved on to Chao's gift. It was a new weapons set, of real kunai and shuriken instead of the dulled edge and rusty kind he was used to using. Included was a practice set of the weapons his mom had on the rack, along with several others he didn't know the names of. And to his delight, was a coupon book to his favorite ramen shop, Ichiraku. This other gift was from his father. Apparently his father liked to wear the yukata and male kimono just as much as he did, because there was a large variety of them, in many colors and designs, with haori and hakama as well. There was a note from his father that he may be a ninja, but he also represented the noble clans of Namikaze and Uzumaki. As such, be the prince he was born to be. Putting that aside, he went to Shikaku's next. Shikaku's gift was books on tactics and strategy, and some on old battles for Naruto to dissect and analyze. The gift from his mother was a board that can change from Go to Shogi, and apparently it came from his great-grandfather, at the time the head of the Uzumaki family. To change it from Go to Shogi, you had to apply chakra, and the two different sets of pieces were in two drawers that were somewhat hard to find if you didn't have sharp eyes. Setting the large board on the other side of the room, in what would divide into a bedroom with the fusuma, he went back to the scrolls and took Shiba's gift, remembering that the Aburoom didn't speak much to anyone, but no one had seemed to mind. The gift was a set of books and scrolls, and paper of several kinds, pencils, and a calligraphy set. There was a note attached that Naruto smiled brightly at. If you wish to be a Hokage, then you need to learn all aspects of Konoha, including its culture. I will be helping you in this, but for the meantime, learn a little for yourself. The gift was from his mother again, and it was her grandmother's tea and sake set. It had an intricate design of swirls, and some flower that he guessed was supposed to be a cherry blossom. With it came a tea ceremony book, and a note. My grandmother loved this set, and so did I. Please treat it well. Nodding to himself that he would take great care of it, he set it aside to see Miyako's gift. Inside were clothes for every day that wasn't training or dressing up. Also there was a photograph album. You deserve to know how much we all wanted you. Especially your parents. He didn't bother opening it now, planning to open it at night so he could be alone. The gift from his father this time, and it was sealing scroll, or actually several. With it was a scroll rack, in which he placed in his bedroom area, and took out the scrolls from the safe and put them with his father's scrolls and the other scrolls he had received. The gift from Hiyashi was pictures to decorate his room with, seeing that it was so bare. They were old style, but Naruto appreciated it, though would need help putting those up as well. Along with it was a flower arrangement for the cubby hole in the living room of the room. The gift from his father was a very large scroll, with a note that only Hiyashi and two others could be allowed to read this scroll, if he wanted help. The Jiraiya person didn't sound familiar, but he wondered if Kakashi was Kakashi ni-san. But for some reason, the scroll wouldn't open, and the note said it wouldn't open until it recognized that Naruto was ready. Whatever that meant. The last gift was from Sume, and hers was a piece of paper that explained he would be getting it in 2 weeks. Naruto shrugged. He could wait. He was simply happy still from the yukata he was still wearing from Sasuke's mom. The last gift was from his mother, and it was a tanto, her mother's gift to her, and a bonsai, and included was a small pair of scissors and a note. I received this gift from my sensei in Whirlpool. His name was Hotaka Sensei, a great man, and one of my father figures. This tree is a rare breed, as it is from Whirlpool, your ancestors' old home. Respect it, and take care of it, my little Senpuu. If he, Hotaka Sensei, hadn't been there, you wouldn't either. Putting the tree in the center of the table, he reviewed over all of his gifts, putting them in an orderly fashion around his room. It had barely been an hour since Hiyashi had left him to his own devices, and then a knock was on the door, and Naruto opened it to see a teenage boy that had a beige kimono and pale lavender eyes. He smiled and bowed low before the blonde. Naruto-sama, it is time to eat lunch. Please follow me. The blonde did so, talking to his guide the entire way, asking everything and anything that came to mind. It didn't take them long to reach the same room he had been in earlier, but with different people this time. There was Hiyashi and Keiko, but now there was boy and a girl about his age that were eating with them. Hiyashi motioned for the blonde to sit beside him, which he did so, and a servant came from nowhere to bring him a strange meal. Later, he learned it was tempura vegetables and sushi with salmon and ginger. The rest of the meal was like breakfast, but the fish was replaced with beef, and along with the glass of milk was some ginger tea and 2 red apples. Before anyone could start to eat, Hiyashi introduced Naruto to the two others. "Hinata, Neji, this is Naruto Oji. He will be staying with us every other 2 weeks, and training as well. His parents were my old teammates, and as such, you will treat him with the greatest respects. Naruto Oji, the one beside you is my daughter, Hinata, who is your age. She is your little sister. And across from you is Neji, my nephew, your cousin." Naruto smiled. More family. He turned to Hinata, cocking his head slightly. "Hello, Imouto." Hinata, being quite shy, ducked her head and mumbled a hello. When he said hello to Neji, the boy merely ignored his presence. Hiyashi would have gotten angry, but Keiko shot him a look and he calmed down. The meal wasn't quiet, which was different, but very pleasant, as Hinata got to learn about her new older brother, and she laughed once in a while at his antics, along with her parents. After everyone was dismissed from lunch, Hiyashi took Naruto to the side, and they walked around one of the gardens. "Naruto Oji, I think now is a good time to tell you about your training schedule. We understand that you want to be with Sasuke, but only at certain parts of the day can you two train together. He has his family who wishes to train him in their own arts, so he scheduled with Makoto-san on what times were available for training and play. Do you understand this?" The blonde nodded, knowing this to be true. Sasuke had told him before that he was of age for training, so it was not much surprise to him. But the training schedule they had him on was, he would wake every morning at 5 with Hinata, and the two would train in chakra control. Then after 2 hours of that, have breakfast, then head off to the Naras, where Shikaku would put him to work with strategy and tactics, and Inoichi would work on the mind with him, psychology, philosophy, and how to use it in warfare. Then after the 2 hours with them, he was to go to the Akamichi, and they had someone by the name of Maida Guide teaching him and their son taijutsu. That was for 3 hours, then he would go eat with the Akamichi, and then was allowed to train and play with Sasuke for 3 hours after that in the safety of the Inuzuka compound, along with Tsume's son, and Miyako would be there. After that, he had free time for 2 hours, suggested that he studies, and eats at the Inuzuka for dinner. The order remains the same when he stays at the Inuzuka. Then goes to the Aburoom for lessons for an hour, then back to the Hyuga, where he got training from Hiyashi in ninjutsu and taijutsu for 2 hours. After that, he was free to do as he wished, but suggested to go to bed around 11 at night, for 6 hours of sleep. The blonde would come to learn that this schedule was hell. "Naruto ni-sama, wake up, it's time to go." A gentle but hurried voice came from the living room of his room. Groggily, Naruto got up for his little sister's sake, and set about getting ready. "I'll be there in a few minutes, Imouto." "Alright, I'll wait outside." The blonde first went to his closet, and grabbed a random outfit for the day. It was a black shirt with fish netting to his wrists, and over that was a black jacket with orange sleeves to his elbow, one of the spirals and wooden toggles on his left sleeve, and a large orange hood that was lined on the inside with soft black rabbit fur. His pants were black with thick red and orange stripes on the sides, and went to his shins, tied with black bandages, and exposed the fish netting that went into the black ninja sandals. Leaving his room, he and the shy Hinata ran to the training area Hiyashi had designated for them. Just on time, they got there, and Hiyashi nodded, beginning immediately. "Alright, today we start on chakra control. First, I'll show you how to do it, and then I want you to try it." He plucked a leaf from a nearby tree, and putting it on his hand, he used chakra to attach it to himself. He turned his hand over to show that it stayed attached, and Naruto was excited. Could he attach himself to a building like he had seen Anbu by doing this? He and Hinata began, Hiyashi sitting a bit away to let them learn it on their own. It took Hinata 45 minutes, while it took Naruto a full hour and a half. Hiyashi explained this to them. "The reason it was easier for you, Hinata, is 2 reasons. 1. You have less chakra. Now, girls naturally have less chakra as it is, as they do not spend the time working on their stamina. Since you do, you have more chakra than average girls. But all the same, I am going to be upping your stamina and endurance. The second reason is that you've already had training in focusing your chakra in a certain point with the Juken style. So do not feel bad, Naruto-sama. It is good that you managed this in so short of time, when comparing to how much chakra you have. I would say right now you are at the level of a low chunin. But because of the lack of control, it takes more chakra for you to use techniques than it takes others. Naruto started attaching leaves all over his body, on his palms, bottom of his feet, and many inside his jacket so no one could see. Breakfast was a quiet affair until Naruto came along, and he brought loud noise and laughter to the usually tension-filled room. But when it ended, he quickly left to go to the Nara clan's home, and met with Shikaku, Inoichi, and Shikaku's son Shikamaru. To start off, he was explained the rules of shogi and go, and then played shogi against the young lazy bum. He lost, but to the shock of the other three, it was pretty close, and that was enough to get Shikamaru to respect the blonde. Only his father beat him at the game, and now there was someone close to it, that was his age. Then, the two shinobi started coaching on the lessons of tactics and strategy, and how psychology played into it. Then Inoichi went into a philosophical rant of how mostly religion affected the psychology of a person, and Shikaku just shook his head as the two boys' minds were blown away. Then it was off to the Akamichi. Learning about elements and seals from Shusa alongside his son Choji, and after that introduction, he was introduced to the scariest freakiest man alive. A man in a skin-tight bright green spandex. A tall, muscle man with black hair bowl cut. He could have lived with it, if only slightly weirded out. No, what made the man scary was the bushy eyebrows that moved. They were like caterpillars. Shusa merely patted his shoulder before leaving the poor blonde exposed to this. There was no word to describe it. Chao's whispered words before he left: "Whatever you do not agree to wear the spandex." Tell him these words exactly: "My youthfulness is brighter with my individuality. Have fun Naruto, and learn well. This man is a genius of taijutsu, and was one of your mother's students. Hello, Naruto Oji. I have long awaited the day to be able to teach Kushina sensei's son, and that day has come. And your youthfulness shines brightly on this fine day. You must wear this green outfit to commemorate such a day." Blue eyes bulged before he stuttered, My youthfulness shines brighter with my individuality." Guy stared him down, as searching his soul if this was true. Konoha's beautiful green beast seemed satisfied as he nodded, scratching his chin. You're right. You are much more youthful with your appearance, and you wear the chakra weights to help you on your path. Well, Naruto Oji, let us start with the basics, and then we will move on to other styles. I do not know how your father's style works, and your mother's style kills those who attempt it, as it requires the Kamagen, so you will have to learn that on your own, I am afraid. But fear not, for I will help you where I can." Naruto smiled, and said to the strange man, "Yeah, I know, thanks. Now let's get started." Guy could have cried in joy. Until he learned of the way Naruto fought during their spar. It wasn't anything he had ever seen, but reminded him heavily of Kushina sensei. There were fighters who took hits, but delivered powerful decisive ones of their own. Then there were those who took out the opponent automatically. Hundreds of styles and personalities he had seen. But he was not prepared for this. The blonde constantly switched. 1 second all about speed, but then he has power punches, despite his young age, but instead of aimed at places to damage, he goes for vitals, creating even more damage. Defense, offense, counter-attack, ambush, planning ahead. This kid was unpredictable in his process, toying with the opponent, and quite good, though he could use a lot of work in his forms, but there was raw untapped potential right there. Especially when he tricked Guy. 1 second Naruto had been right there, but then he used his wind and Mokuton, and he completely had Guy on the belief to look for him, when Naruto was still standing right there. He had the ability to trick people into seeing things, without a genjutsu. Guy just grinned at the prospect of this student. For 2 hours with Guy, it was worth going back to the Akamichis and eating with them. They made a lot of food, and he was welcomed at their table with warm arms, and many hearty gestures, as the table was loud, boisterous, jolly, and Naruto's style. But after the meal came time to go to the Inuzuka compound, where upon entering, he knew where Sasuke and the two adults were because of their sense. Deciding to sneak up on the ever-unsuspecting Uchiha, he did so, sticking to the forest of the compound, making sure he is seen by no one. He had hid his chakra before entering, and not too long later, he followed his nose to find the Uchiha sitting with a young boy that he assumed was Tsun's, and they were playing while the two women were off to the side, talking privately. Knowing that at least the two other boys were unsuspecting, he leapt out of the forest line, tackling Sasuke while yelling, "Oh tout oh 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 oh." The raven-haired boy merely yelped at this action, before falling flat on his face. The blonde now sitting on top of his back, before he rolled off, standing gracefully with a foxy grin on his face. Sasuke's eye just ticked, before he stood, brushing off the dirt, and his voice, usually kind towards the blonde, was slightly different, but the blonde knew the difference immediately. Having spent an entire year together gave you abilities to get to know someone and all their quirks. Naruto. That's how his name sounded when Sasuke was irritated, though not angry. In the course of their friendship, only one time were they angry at each other to the point of endangering such a friendship. And he never wanted to hear that way Sasuke said his name again, never. The blonde laughed lightly, dispelling the tension almost instantly. Ah, come on Sasuke. Let's go. The Uchiha followed automatically, though with only a slight amount of the irritation still there. But that was quickly gone as the other two were introduced to the women. Sasuke, being of the Uchiha, would normally not show any respect above a nod of acknowledgement to them, as all were trained since birth to believe they were Kami's gift to the world. Sasuke astounded the two women with his bow and shy attitude. It was cute as hell on the boy. They watched as despite hitting off a good start with Kiba, the boy stuck extremely close to Naruto, almost in a protective stance. If the blonde noticed, he either didn't care or didn't bother. To be truthful, he was used to it ever since after their one argument 3 months into their friendship. Sume cataloged the information for later, but started off the lessons. Alright, Sasuke-kun told me about the scrolls he got for the two of you. Some elemental, a couple easy ones, and such. We will be helping you with that, but also with ninja skills just if not more important than jutsu. The boys were dumbfounded at such an idea. Jutsu not always important? What was this woman on? Jutsu were always important. Sume sighed, getting the gist of their thoughts by their faces, though they were funny to laugh at, and she wished dearly for a camera at this moment. She continued, shinobi are meant to fight, yes, but they are also meant for other things. Such as sneaking, strategy and tactics, disguise, infiltrating and extracting information, and so much more. Now, today, we'll start with the theory of close combat. The boys groaned, and knew that this was their life from now on. It brought a great sense of camaraderie that all three suffered together. After lessons were over, and Kiba was torn away to go help someone on an errand, and forced to stay away from his new-founded friends, Naruto and Sasuke decided to practice for a little before Naruto told him everything that happened in the past 2 days. The raven-haired boy was a little surprised at first, but it very quickly wore off. When asked, he shrugged, and pointed his thumb in the general direction of the Hokage monument. I've always thought you looked almost exactly like him, but thought it might be a coincidence. Add to the fact of what happened when the Kyuubi attacked, it makes sense that very few actually know who you are. Yondaime had a lot of enemies, so I think everyone was protecting you by not associating with you. But now that both of your bloodlines are awake, and with the power of the most sacred and powerful demon of them all right inside you to back it up, it would be harmful if you were not trained properly starting now. From what you said your parents wrote, they were waiting till you were 6 to have their friends intervene. And from what they have told you, with your parents awakening their bloodlines early on as well, they are using that excuse as to take you in and training you so Hokage-sama cannot retaliate too much. Though he and the council. Sasuke went quiet for a minute, trying to puzzle something together, while Naruto reviewed over his best friend's words. From the way the information was put together, it made it seem like the clan heads had waited 6 years only because they had to, not because they wanted to. This made him feel all warm on the inside, at the thought that people wanted him. But the idea of Gigi-san doing this to him deliberately hurt him very much. With some talking to Hiashi, he was explained that Sandaime was doing this to protect him and the village, though in the end Naruto was severely hurt for it. Hiashi merely lifted the boy and hugged him tightly. It was all he could do. So, we have done everything we can to prepare you while waiting 6 years to get you back. Politics is a horrible thing, and is the only reason we waited. Sasuke, the only voice of reason to Naruto until now, spoke up again. Naruto, you said your last name is Namikaze Uzumaki, right? Getting a nod, he continued, I don't think you should tell anyone this for a while. Yes, it will be strange that you as an orphan and outcast are selected by a bunch of clans to be trained under their care, but they can play it off with something like potential awakening of a new bloodline, or even to make the villagers feel safe that, forgive me, the demon is under the watch of some of the most respected and powerful ninja. And the other reason, well, the Namikaze clan went into hiding almost 15 years ago because the clan was dying out due to the war. If the council was to learn of your bloodline and abilities, as they undoubtedly knew both your parents, a dujutsu like your mother's is very noticeable, and even I've heard of it before. How do I explain this? Naruto waved his hand, like we always do. Just get to the point. Sasuke sighed. If they were to learn of the existence of the son of two such prominent people, they will do certain things, several if not all of them. First, they will try to schmooze you, and will start arranging your marriage to many women when you are of age. A fact that they couldn't do to your mother, I'm guessing, because she either refused, or had already chosen your father. But you being male, well, they can force you. Almost everyone would want your eyes, more than Sharingan or Byakugan, as well as the Mokuton and your affinities of wind and water, and the Namikaze's abilities with Fuinjutsu. Second, if they learned of your heritage, they will probably tell the entire shinobi world about the son of the great Yondaime. Just because they hate you, stupidly, I say, doesn't mean they won't use you to taunt the world with your presence. To Kumo and Iwa, your existence is a great threat to them, as your parents had killed many in the war. The potential for you to surpass them is already evident, and with the Kyuubi, I honestly don't think there is anything to stop you, if you're trained right, and you become a master of your bloodlines, and a seal master, and anything else you want to be. Sasuke saw a fear in Naruto that scared the raven-haired boy himself. To go from having nothing, and being carefree, his best friend now had many responsibilities, and he knew that Naruto wouldn't think about the damn council, too happy to have a last name and a family. He knew the blonde honestly could care less about the bloodlines, if only to have a family. But he needed his friend to be wary of those outside their small circle that seemed to be growing. He can't take care of his best friend and older brother if the blonde wasn't in his sight, and this he hated. So, despite saddening the now Namikaze Uzumaki, he felt little guilt for bringing it up. The blonde was scary smart most of the time, but sometimes, he wasn't. The Uchiha just shrugged it off, as it was his personality, and just how he came from growing up alone with no one but Anbu and Hokage-sama giving a damn. He would not fault Naruto for something like that, and in fact praised him, to himself, as he had no one to praise him to, and it was still odd to bring it up to his mother, for even coming out so decent of a person despite all the hatred aimed at him unjustly. He was only 6, barely starting ninja training, and even he knew the difference between a bloodthirsty demon and a lonely child. It was said that demons kill everything, and even in human form, they have an evil killing intent about them, unable to repress all their power. Naruto was anything but. When Sasuke had met him over a year ago, he could tell that Naruto was no bad person. In fact, he seemed rather noble, even now as he sat in the grass, leaning against the tree, a knee brought up a little to support an elbow, while his hands played with some flowers he found, and he had an extremely thoughtful and scared look on his face. No, Naruto, his surrogate older brother, his best friend, no matter how much any one of those bastards deny it, and no matter if and when he kills, or lets himself lose himself in a battle, will Naruto ever be a monster. It just wasn't possible, and he was going to hurt anyone for so much as saying such things about the blonde when in his presence. Because even if the two had been friends for just a year, he would never give his best friend up, despite the argument that seemed so long ago. It was because of the argument that he hated the idea of not being able to at least protect, if not fight by the blonde's side. And why he swore to himself to become the head of Anbu, and personal guard of only one blonde Hokage of the name Naruto. He even forced Naruto to promise him this when he took office. He was wondering who to talk to about fixing genin teams, until he saw Naruto look up, his eyes clear and that determined, sharp look in them again, a deadly smirk on his face. The blonde took out a tanto, and before Sasuke could react, he cut himself deep in his right hand, and the blood fell to the floor, dripping from his clenched hand, stretching it in front of him, speaking firmly. No regrets and no broken promises. To protect my precious people to the bitter end. That is my family Nindo. It is my Nindo. Standing there for a second, unsure, Sasuke quickly resolved what he was to do, and took the tanto from the blonde, and doing exactly as he did, cut deep into the palm of his right hand, letting it bleed from below his middle finger to heel of his palm. Clenching his own fist, he let the blood fall onto the grass and spoke evenly. You are my brother, my family. I will have no regrets, and no broken promises. I will protect my precious people to the bitter end. Your Nindo is my Nindo. With that, both boys clasped bloody hands, determined looks on their faces, blood mixing to pronounce that they were blood brothers and would stay that way. After a while they let go, leaning against the tree as the fall afternoon went by slowly, a breeze playing at their hair and clothes. Anyo, Sasuke? HN? That glint came into his eye, a devilish glint that barely touched the tip of iceberg with the deadly intelligence of the blonde. Sasuke almost feared for the lives of any who will cross the blonde's path in the many battles ahead of them. Let's give him hell, nay, Otuto? Sasuke's grin matched the blonde's, nodding slightly. Of course, Naruto. It'll be fun. Almost feared was the key word. Because he would be with Naruto on those battlefields, and would be damned if he couldn't match him.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.